I saw some correspondence on the minutes, and one of the people who had a question on the minutes, Kevin Thurman, is not here, so I'm hesitant to take a vote on the minutes. You know, Mike Smith and Kevin straightened out the minutes.
The minutes are ready for approval.
I mean, the issue of who said what between Mike.
I fixed that already. They can be approved tonight.
Mike, I don't know if you've heard that. I wanted to make sure that the minutes, since Kevin's not here,
Right.
you and he agreed on who said what, and Sarah said it was fine.
That's fine.
Okay. I'll wait, oh, Marion, too. I had to look twice, couldn't see who the man. What was that movie, Leonardo DiCaprio, the twins with King, and one was the Iron Man, Man of the Iron Man. All right, Mary Ann's here, we can start. It's a little bit after 7, so the meeting is officially started. I want to recognize that George Boyle, a long-standing planning board member, has resigned in the past few days. We're going to miss George. He was a valued asset. He had a way with the right words to articulate concerns. We all had concerns, but George had a way of putting them into words that were easily understood. At least I thought they were easily understood. Certainly miss George, and anybody knows him, I wish that you wish him well. He had some business requirements. He'd been meaning to retire over the last year. Retire from the planning board, not from his architectural firm. And if you recall, if anybody's been here the last 2 meetings, he missed half of the last 2 meetings because of professional obligations at his work and trying to travel between work and here. So for tonight, we have Michael Bifulco. He's going to sit in for George. And Kevin Thurman, normally on the board, is on vacation. And Lori Davidowitz will sit in for Kevin Thurman. And of course, we have Dan McGillicott, myself, Caesar Manfredi, and Michael Smith. For the purpose of the written minutes, I will refer to Michael Smith as Michael Smith and Michael Bifulco as Michael, because it's easier to say Michael Smith than Michael Bifulco. All right, so the minutes are okay. We have a motion to, there's only 3 of us that were at the last meeting, so the 3 of us vote on the minutes from the last meeting.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Oh,
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that's done. Sarah, the taxes are all done?
Yes.
Oh, by the way, at some point in the middle of this, since we're all wearing masks, it's difficult to talk for 3 or 4 hours that we might be here. At some point, I'm going to take a 5-minute break so we can run outside, take our masks off, get some fresh air, and come back. When you see me come back, that's time to come back. All right, the order for this evening. Number 1, 47 Station Road. Number 2, 49 Kingsley Close. Number 3, 25 South Cotton Street. Number 4, 12 Maple Street. Number 5, 8 Palliser Road. Number 6, 1 Hudson Road West. Number 7, 39 Fargo Lane. And number 8, 50 Half Moon Lane. Number 1, 2021-25, 47 Station Road.
John Malone, First Malone Architecture, representing, is it working?
Yeah.
With the mask, John, you may have to do.
Yeah, I know, maybe put it closer, I can do that. Representing the Mallets, I think when we were last here, there was a question, the only open item was a wetlands permit request. which I think is attached, or was, I don't think the comments are up here, or recent comments that we got back from Holland, I believe they accepted that. There was a few other, there was a request from the landscape architect, from Suzanne, to expand the planting, which we did. We provided a buffer. See if I can get there for you.
There's a buffer around the patio.
Yeah, buffer around the patio to address potential runoff from the rear patio. So this was added, and then there were a few engineering items that we added, a level spreader conditioner, anti-erosion at the end of the existing piping.
And you took care of the stream is right back there, so you took care of all the wetland, waterway, wetland, and floodplain.
Correct.
And it was the 34-inch tree, the village tree in the front.
Village tree in the front is now shown as protected in the tree protection plan. So we had protected this 28 tree on the way in because would be the site access, but we also have protected the 34-inch tree here.
Now, the access road is the root or drip line of the 20, what's it, 26, 28?
Right, so the access through these two trees is through the driveway, so there isn't any root protection indicated there.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John. Is that it?
That's it.
Now, hold the ball. Board, Laura, you have any comments on this?
No, thank you.
Daniel?
No comments.
I have no comment. Mike Smith?
No comments.
And Mike?
No comments.
Mary Ann, we have a resolution on this?
There you, there is in June 2021, Dorothy and Daniel, is it Mallet? How do you say it?
Mallet.
Applied for
Excuse me, Mary Ann, do you need the microphone or?
Yeah, you know what?
Any of the prisoners? Or copy.
Oh, yeah. Swear, I'm out of practice.
I don't know.
Yeah, this in-person stuff is
Yeah, I know.
taking us for a curve here.
They applied for site development plan approval to build an addition along with the second patio on their house at 47 Station Road, which lies in the View Preservation District and contains a portion of the Barney Brook water course. And Horace Town Engineering reviewed the plans and in memorandum dated June 1st and July 6th, listed a number of issues, all of which were satisfactorily addressed in subsequent submissions. And whereas the village's landscape consultant reviewed the plans and made recommendations which were addressed to her satisfaction in subsequent submissions. And whereas the planning board held a public hearing on June 2nd, July 7th, and August 4th, 2021, whereas proposed construction requires a freshwater wetlands permit and is detailed in Tom's July 30th, 2021 memorandum that meets the requirements for that permit. And whereas the proposal also requires a water bodies and water courses permit and is detailed in House July 30th, 2021 memorandum that meets the requirements for that permit. And whereas the action is type 2 action under secret and therefore requires no environmental review, now therefore be it resolved that the planning board issues a freshwater wetlands and a water bodies and water courses permit and grants site development plan approval for the construction reflected in the drawing entitled Mallet Residence prepared by Ferguson Malone Architect. No conditions.
Okay, I forgot to mention any comment from the public on 47 Station Road. Any comment in the public on the resolution? Do you have a motion to approve the resolution on the board?
Motion to approve.
Second. Lori?
Approved.
Mike, Dan?
Approved.
Caesar Manfredi, yes. Michael Smith?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if there's someone here who can pick up the approval, John?
Oh, yep.
You know to give one copy. I know this in-person stuff is,
Yeah, I got it.
get out of habit here. Okay, next up is, I don't know if I can see with my glasses, there we go. Number 2, 49 Kingsley Close. That's 2021-24.
So this is a similar, this is John Malone, Ferguson Malone Architecture, representing the Arkans, 49 Kingsley Close. This is a similar situation where we, the last outstanding piece was a wetlands permit request, which we provided to Han, and I think they accepted our position on it.
Doug, we okay? Doug, he said he thinks you accepted it. Did you accept it?
Yes.
And I don't think there are any other open items that we were addressing in this one.
That was the only thing in my notes.
Yeah.
Any comment from the public on 47 Kingsley Close?
49.
I'm sorry, 49, thank you. My lousy handwriting. Okay, Mary Ann, you have a resolution?
Whereas in June 2021, Hannah and Jonathan Arkin applied for site development plan approval to build a deck on their house 49 Kingsley Close, which is located within 100 feet of village wetlands. And whereas Hannah Engineering reviewed the plans and the memorandum dated June 1st and July 6th, listed a number of issues, all of which were satisfactorily addressed in subsequent submissions. The village's landscape consultant reviewed the plans and made recommendations which were addressed to her satisfaction in the subsequent submissions. And the planning board held a public hearing on June 2nd, July 7th, and August 4th, 2021. Whereas the proposed construction requires a freshwater wetlands permit and is detailed in July 30th, 2021 memorandum meets the requirements for their permit. And whereas the action is a type 2 action under secret and therefore requires no environmental review. Now therefore be it resolved that the planning board issues a freshwater wetlands permit and grants site development plan approval for the construction reflected in the drawing entitled Arkin Residence, then their details prepared by Ferguson Malone Architecture. And there's recommendation.
Okay. Any questions on the resolution from anybody?
No.
Lori?
Approved, yeah.
Dan?
Approved.
Caesar says approved. Michael Smith?
Approved.
Michael?
Approved.
Okay. You want to come up and get that done? Next, number 3 is 2021-23, 25 South Continent Street. By the way, thanks, John. Got those two out of the way quickly.
Yes. Thank you. He's right. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, member of the board. My name is Brian Crowley, architect representing Dr. Rapport, who is with us in the crowd tonight. This is our third time in front of you for this particular project. I believe all comments that have been issued to date have been resolved to satisfaction. We are in receipt of Hans' recent review comments, rather, that were received yesterday, and they essentially speak to the 3 variances that will be sought after for the project. The first comment spoke to the lot coverage, which I believe we had addressed prior to last month's meeting, but for the record, we will be seeking a 342 square foot variance for the overall lot coverage of the property. The second issue speaks to FAR. This is the one that was not fully resolved last month, and after going back, recalculating things, including the portions of the basement as necessary, we will be seeking a variance of 627 square feet for the proposed project, which is 26.6% over the allowable.
What was the existing?
The existing was, calculating the same way, including the basement, existing was 2954.
And the new
Which
was
is 125.4%, and the proposed is 129.82. It's a difference of 30-some-odd square feet.
in percentage, what's the difference?
1.2% greater than existing.
Okay, thank you.
And the third
You do
issue...
the same thing for coverage?
Pardon me, sir?
Do the same analysis for
Yes, I mean,
existing versus the new?
there was existing undocumented, existing documented, and then proposed. So the difference...
By the way, for the purposes of anything before the planning board, anything undocumented is part of proposed.
Understood. So, but I believe that your request a couple of months ago, yes, that we break it out separately, which we
Right.
did in the plans. So what it comes down to is that we are proposing 1,708 square foot of coverage, which is 342 square feet over the allowable.
In percentage, what is that?
25% to 2% over the allowable.
Okay. Got it.
Okay?
Yeah.
Yep. And then the third issue has to do with the rear yard setback. Just to refresh everyone's memory, there's an existing enclosed screen and porch on the back of the property. It is 27.7 feet from the. I gotta check it. It's 27.8 feet from the rear yard. We aren't trying to. We aren't trying to make the situation any worse. We would just be extending the rear deck along that same line, which keeps the rear yard setback equal with what is existing, which is 2.3 feet closer to the rear yard property line than it should be. Okay, here we go. So this is the line right here. This is the existing sunroom, back of the house. And that line is just being continued. So we are 27.7 feet from the rear yard as opposed to 30 that are required. So those are the three variances being requested. 342 square feet for lot coverage, 627 square feet for FAR, and 2.3 feet for rear yard setback. And there was one additional comment from the reviewing landscape architect that I can speak to if we're satisfied with those three. I believe Han is satisfied at this
Let's
point?
scroll down a little bit, and we'll take a look at what
Sure. What would you like to look
landscape
at?
architect, what you're planting. Keep going down. Go ahead.
There's no additional landscape architecture plans in the set.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the comment basically,
Well, the comment was, one of the set of plans we saw said screening to be determined.
correct,
Matters before the planning board are not left to be determined.
correct. So,
And the comment from the landscape architect is that the existing screening is adequate. You don't need to do anything. So in order for this to be approved, you need to take off the to be determined piece that was on the plans that I saw recently.
yes, not a problem at all.
Okay. Any comment from the public? Full board, Laurie,
No comment.
Dan,
No comments here.
all finished? Mike Smith
No comments.
and Michael.
No comment.
Mary Ann, you have a resolution?
Whereas in June 2021, Vermont 4 applied for site development. Plan approval to construct an addition to 2025 Cottage Street, which is located in the Conservation District, and emphasize that the action applies to the action under SECR. Resolved, that the planning board grants the application for site development plan approval of the improvements reflected in the drawings entitled For Residence, prepared by Brian Crowley, architecture, subject to 1, receiving variances in the ZBA for coverage FAR and the rear yard setback, and 2, noting on the drawings that existing planting should be preserved and protected as requested by the owner.
Any questions on the resolution, anybody? We have a vote, Laurie,
Yes, approved.
Yes.
Caesar, yes, Michael Smith,
Approved.
and Michael.
Approved.
Muffin.
Thank you very much, appreciate your time, everybody.
Number 4 is a new application, it's 2021-31 at 12 Maple Street. Is anyone here for 12 Maple Street?
I'm the homeowner. I emailed our architect. Am I going to be helpful at all, or?
Is your architect on his way?
Michael Lewis?
Oh, we did talk to him. Yeah. Okay, we'll carry over for a little while.
Okay, so I should
Just have a seat, we'll wait for Michael.
We'll do 5 and 6 and then come back.
We talked to him, we know he's coming, so
Okay.
As long as he brings his mask.
this mess at the back.
All right, we'll hold number 12 aside for a moment and move to number 5, 2021-30, 8 Palliser Road.
Hello, everyone.
Bring the microphone closer to you, please.
Yes. All right. Good evening, members of the planning board, members of the building department. My name is Eva Buhasra. I'm an architect for Mr. Searle and Ms. Rudenstein.
Hold on a second. Hey, Sarah, isn't it true if she hits that little diamond there, she can get rid of the stuff on the right and make that bigger? Not that diamond. Down,
Down the middle.
down the middle.
Down, up a little bit.
I'm sorry.
Triangle in the bar.
Right by the architect's seal, to the right of the seal. Right, right there.
Oh, I see
Yeah,
what you
just
mean.
raise this and close.
All right, there we go. And where's the zoom? Okay, here's the zoom. All right, so, 8 Palliser Road is a single home residence, and, the application in front of the board tonight, has to do with the, proposed expansion of the existing deck. And I will actually jump to the pictures for just a second. As you can see, this home has an existing deck. Opposite the deck is a steeply rising part of the property, which is rocky, and there's a gap between the deck and the rising part. The deck was built originally in possibly around 1997 when the house was built, and it's very low to the ground. The height above the rest of the yard is only about 16 to 24 inches or so. The railings are kind of superfluous. It's not really terribly practical to actually have railings at that height, and at the same time, this space is not very usable. Therefore, this application proposes to extend the existing deck to the rocky outcropping, and in doing so, create a larger, more comfortable deck. And the square footage then goes up to about 600 square feet, because the existing deck is about 300 square feet, and by increasing the footage, we end up at about total 600 something square feet. In terms of zoning requirements, there are no issues with the setbacks. You can see that the property buildable area is delineated by the front yard setback, which is here, and the 2 sides, and the rear yard setback. So the proposed work falls inside the buildable envelope, and there are no setback variances required. However, the square footage of the deck makes it necessary to apply for a zoning variance because we are exceeding the coverage for the lot. The allowable coverage for the lot is 12%, and the current coverage, if you add the area of the house and the area of the sidewalks and the existing deck, comes to 14.7%. So as of now, the coverage already exceeds the allowed 12% by about 2.7%. We, with the extension of the deck, we are adding another 1.3%, which brings the coverage from 14.7 to 16%. And this is the approval that we're seeking today. You can also see the deck on the elevation, and we are installing new windows in the existing wall. And if you look at the side elevation, you can see that the existing deck is somewhere in this vicinity. It has the handrails, which we're removing, and then we're extending the deck straight backwards towards the rock outcrop.
Are you going to replace the deck that's there, or is this going to extend it?
We're going to retain the structure, and we will replace the decking.
Oh, okay, you're going
We're going to take off the decking boards, which
Right,
are
okay.
pressure-treated
Keep the
pine.
foundation.
Keep the foundation, keep the footings, inspect the condition of the framing, add more framing, and install new decking. So the deck is unified.
That's it?
That's it. And we have received the comments from Han Engineering, and they had asked to clarify the drainage means underneath the new deck. So we will do that. We will address the exact ways of draining this area. They basically suggested fabric and gravel. So due to the nature of this extension, we do not need any elaborate new drainage systems, but we will describe the drainage in more detail. Same thing with the erosion. They noted, they asked for single trees with a diameter of 8 inches or more to be shown on the plan. As you can see, there are no trees in this area. There are some other trees which are more distant, but in the area where we're working, there are no trees.
I think you can just say that there are, in the area
Where the work is happening.
yeah.
Yeah, and they asked for the utilities to be shown, and again, we can do that, but the utilities happen in the front of the house, and all of the work we're doing is in the back of the house.
You can just confirm that, and then check the coverage also, based on the comments of the last couple of sentences.
All right, thank you, we will do that. And I guess I could quickly just show this particular depiction, which is the, as you can see in the aerial view, here's the house, here's the existing deck, here are the racks, and we're extending the deck to reach the rocky face. And then, of course, you'll be able to step down on either side of the deck if you were walking from here then onto the deck and then back down.
This has nothing to do with us, I'm just curious, you're going to get footings out because of the rock, or you're going to cantilever the deck?
We're going to put regular footings
With all the
down.
rock there?
Well, if we find rock, we will pin the footings. I mean, we will stop at the rock, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Doug, didn't you have any, there were some coverage numbers that had to be fixed, are they fixing them, or do they know that?
Yeah, I mentioned that she's gonna double check those and make sure that those numbers are all set.
They're not now.
I think that.
I don't think there was any comments about the numbers. The numbers were all fine.
Yeah, no, there are. Any existing or proposed structure for air conditioner, patios
Yes,
included,
that has been included, actually.
mechanical equipment.
Yes, that is all included,
so on.
yes.
Okay, I didn't see it on there, but.
I must have put it under sidewalks or something, but in fact, I had it included. Yeah.
So just clarify that point.
Oh, there's actually, see, 9 square feet for each mechanical pad, so you can see that there.
You saw it?
Okay, any comment from the board? Lori?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
I'm finished. Michael Smith?
I do. So we have a memo from Han.
Yes?
Paragraph 1 says, proposed coverage is exceeded by 33.5% over allowable and 8.7% greater than existing.
Right.
And the numbers that you gave were different than that, so I'm just trying to understand them.
Yes, so what I was referring to was a total allowable coverage for the property, which is 12%. And we're going to 16%, and
Talking
it
about the
going
entire-
from 12 to
As a
16.
lot size, that percentage.
So if you take the
From-
difference between 12 and 16,
from 12 to
that's 4,
16
which is 33.5%.
Is the 33%, yes.
Okay.
We're increasing the allowed 12% by 33%, ending up at 16.
Okay, so I understand.
Yeah.
Oh, different way.
I have no further questions.
Michael? Loco?
No questions.
Any questions from the audience? No questions from the audience. Okay, come back next week with the clarification of the numbers,
Next month.
next month, rather. And we should have a project.
All right, thank you very much.
12 Maples.
12 Maple Barrage? Yes, sir. We will reintroduce 2021-31, 12 Maple Street.
Good evening. I'm Michael Lewis, the architect. So is it, you just scroll down through it to the drawings? Is that how it works?
Yeah, just hit the thumbnail on the left, and don't do that.
Music?
Lines are at the bottom always. Lines are always at the bottom. You just want to drag it right down.
I guess that does make a lot of sense. Ah,
Get rid of this on, see if it stays going. I don't think it will, but.
yeah, great. Thanks. So, this project at 12 Maple Street, it's a modest proposal where we are removing an existing sun porch and replacing it with a two-story addition in this location. It doesn't impact any of the setbacks or coverage. As a matter of fact, we're improving the lot performance fairly significantly, reducing the coverage by about 561 square feet. This is, even though we're adding this part here, this is accomplished by, we're really just cleaning up the site, removing these rocks, removing an old shed, removing a deck that's associated with the existing garage. So we're improving the site in terms of its permeability fairly significantly. We're also removing some small portion of the existing driveway, which is a split driveway, basically concrete pads for the treads in areas where it's inaccessible as part of this work as well. So basically we're adding a new sunroom and a bedroom above at this proposed addition. The height of it is less than the existing building, so it doesn't intrude on the views, and it seems to us very straightforward. We did receive comments from Han Engineering suggesting that there might be some landscaping or some landscaping concerns. We haven't seen any of those. Specifically, we did receive notes from the landscape architect saying that she would really like to see more information regarding the trees in terms of the protection and the labeling of the species and diameter, which we'll be more than happy to provide.
And the definition of the drip lines.
Yep, and the drip lines as well, exactly, yes. So that shouldn't be a problem. Again, they're not, we're happy to provide that information, but as you can see, it's not a concern that would have a lot of impact on the work that we're doing, is the tree, with the tree locations being remote from where we're actually accomplishing the addition. Here are the
Could you
plans.
go back to the other, so you can show us where the access would be? How would you get back there if you have heavy equipment?
You can access from either side, from Buckout
okay.
or from Maple Street. We're showing a staging pad here, but we're cleaning up all this work anyhow, and there's an existing garage, so it really should be quite simple.
Because if it's from the front, you'd be running over tree roots. Okay.
Right.
So you are going to go from Buckout?
Yeah, that's my expectation.
Okay.
You can see where we can come around this way.
If that's the plan, you could just note that on the site plan.
Okay, and I should confirm that, in
Yeah.
fact, and then we would certainly
And
add
that's to
that.
protect the trees in that area.
Mhm.
And the other thing you need to confirm is that while we might agree with you, you need to articulate in writing what you said about the view preservation. It appears that the new addition is behind the existing building, but you need to explain that.
No, you actually did do it in the submission.
Oh, okay.
2 spots.
Very good.
So, any questions?
And the only questions were a technical issue about fixing the numbers on coverage.
That's correct, yeah, I saw that. From here in the letter, we were showing a cover decreasing by 1 foot. In fact, it's decreasing by 561 feet and falling from 560 above, with the existing being 560 above, to 1 foot below the allowable. So we're bringing it into conformance with this project.
Okay. Any comments from the public? No comments from the public. Laurie? Dan?
No comments.
I have none more. Mike Smith?
No comments.
And Michael?
No comments.
Okay, we'll see you next month.
Great, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Next week. Item number 6 is 2021-29, 1 Hudson Road West.
John Malone, Ferguson Malone Architecture, representing Sophie and Michael Roberts. This is a application to add a pool to an existing property off of Broadway on 1 Hudson Road West. The house is an interesting condition because it's a lot that fronts on 3 roads, and the house was originally fronted on Broadway and has had a few rounds of renovation to refront the house towards Hudson Road, and its current address is Hudson Road. So, drawings, okay, sorry. So you'll see that in the survey, it is on the corner of Hudson Road West Bertha on South Broadway. The house is sort of currently fronted towards Bertha Place. The historic, the older front is towards South Broadway. The zoning analysis, we've shown, we've limited our analysis basically to coverage. There is a lot of flat work on the site. I see in the notes that we received from Han a request to identify what is undocumented and what is previously approved. So we've requested copies. There was a recent,
I'll send you that survey.
okay, a relatively, so you found an as-built for it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have it here for you.
Okay. So, and there's also a variance for, in the last, it was 10 years, there's been additions on the house, so we're assuming that that was our starting point. We submitted without that confirmation, so we'll clarify that. We have included, this project will need to go to zoning board because, let me see if I can get to the actual site plan. The proposed pool is here in, on the Broadway side of the pool. Because it is, it's in the rear of the house, the way the house is operating right now, but it's in the front yard. So there will be a variance required for pool location. The pool is hanging slightly into the Broadway buffer. We don't believe there's any significant impact from that, so we will go to zoning board and ask for that variance in the buffer. Otherwise, we are, I think the other, let me just see if the other indication there. So those are the variants. The main variances that we'll be requesting from zoning board is a pool location. There's 3 variances. There'll be a coverage variance because I'm sure we're over allowable. Even if we do find an as-built survey, there's probably some undocumented work. So even though we're slightly reducing coverage from what was existing, we're pulling out a lot of patio or flat work related coverage to offset for the pool. There's a chance that there might be a coverage variance because we're slight increase, and even if we're just sort of shifting coverage, if we're over, we typically are required to get a variance for that. So those are the 3 variances we're requesting. We're showing planting. I think the comments that we received from Suzanne Nolan have to do with clarification of what's happening to the trees. If you see in this corner here, there's a large oak, TR20 in this area here. So the pool excavation in here would be coming into the root zone of that pool. So we'll have an arborist provide happen in terms of excavation there and make sure that that doesn't have any impact on that tree. Usually our arborist sort of indicates that if our impact on the root system of a tree that size is less than 25%, there isn't any danger. So we're sure we're underneath that number. There's some smaller trees that are indicated to be removed, which we will clarify. And I think one of her comments was if there's a required mitigation for those removals, we can work with Suzanne to make sure that we offset those removals. The site is relatively large, so if there was a need for additional, say, shade trees or something like that, we can locate something that mitigates any of the removals that were shown. There is stormwater shown that is sized according to the size of the new pool area. There were some comments, life safety related comments about the fencing, which we will clarify. The boundary for the pool is around this area, so it's actually not using the house as part of the pool boundary. There's an existing fence there, but I think there's an existing pergola thing. I got to check and make sure that that meets pool code. I think that was what your guys' comment was along that line.
There's a lot of extra coverage.
Right.
And you're going to need your setbacks are incorrect. You have 3 front yards and 1 rear yard. You don't have a side yard, so the pool will be in the rear yard setback as well.
Okay. I think the setbacks that we indicated were based on a plan that we had shown. The last submission only showed 2 fronts. So I don't know if you want us to use,
code, that's what the code, the last submission was for a porch renovation.
Right,
It was on top of existing coverage. It was an FAR increase, not coverage.
okay. Okay, so we can show it as three fronts. I don't think there's a significant change, because the area where the pool is impacted, or if we turn this into a rear yard, this that is being
Right.
considered a side yard, if that turns into a rear yard.
One rear yard in the code.
All right, okay. All right. The pool, again, can be, the pool, just so the board understands, like, a pool can be within a rear yard and is typically within a rear yard, so that wouldn't increase the variance, because we wouldn't be asking for a variance for a rear yard. What limits the pool in that, along that sign, is going to be this pool setback. So the pool setback would not change. The rear yard would come in and probably be sitting back in here, but the pool is allowed in the rear yard. So again, what we'll be asking for is going to be related to this small incursion into in terms of setbacks, is going to be a small incursion into the Broadway buffer.
Yeah, no, you also have the pool pool's further to the street from the rear yard line, so you would need that variance as well.
Right, that's the pool location one, which we talked about later, but I'm just saying, just specifically for the change of this side yard to a rear yard, that wouldn't lead to an additional variance. It still would, it's still within the pool setback.
Well,
Right. Is there any questions or anything else?
Yeah, I'll do the trees first. Susan Nolan looked at it, as you know, and there's an issue in that the tree removal chart, you know, the trees to be removed, there were 14 trees to be removed, and there's more trees to be removed on the chart than you have extra through on the
Yeah,
plan.
I see what's happened on the plan is some of these removals in this area are not showing up. So there's removals in this area, and we'll clarify that. I think the layer was not
Also-
showed enough.
The way I look at it, you got three rather large trees, 21, 25, and 26, 14-inch, 10-inch, and 18-inch, all in the Broadway buffer that you want to take down. And I don't,
I think, let me just see what those are.
that's not really a good move to make.
Yeah, I think the ones that we were indicating removal on, I'll clarify that, but we're going to have Malcolm McBurney, we weren't able to get him out to the site before the submission, so we'll have Malcolm come and look and make recommendations on any of the removals.
Continuing on in the Broadway buffer, you got the pool and the patio 14 feet in the buffer. Again, that's really not a application.
The pool extension is only this bit here.
Well, whatever it is,
Yeah,
it's
it's
in the
not-
Broadway buffer.
Yeah, but it's not 14 feet. I think that the reason that we would
That's
ask...
how Doug measured it, so you have to ask him.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think it's that far, but,
Or, yeah, one of them did.
pool patio.
Pool and patio.
okay, so, maybe the cover,
And also, as you
I
well
think there's
know,
36 feet to the property line there. I think.
yeah, so I think that if this line here is not patio, that's a lawn line, I think that's hard to understand, so we'll clarify that too, I think that might be...
having a pool in the
misinterpreted.
Broadway buffer is, as you well know, is
Right.
a problem.
So one of the things that we've included here,
And don't forget that in addition to looking at those trees, cutting trees down in what's supposed to be the Broadway buffer is also not a very good idea.
right, and not to affect the buffer or the look of that, I think if we have tree removals there,
I mean, it was created by the trustees for a
Right.
reason, so.
so this, just to be clear, in this area where a lot of the houses have been refronted to the Hudson Road side, there are other examples of houses extending into the buffer and pools extending into the buffer
You'll have to
further than what
demonstrate
we're...
that the buffer was created after the house was built.
Right, no, I understand that. But in terms of the impact relative to we're
It's probably the
prepared to
reason
make
the
that.
buffer was created, because there was too much infringement existing.
Right, okay. Okay, so we can pick up that, those comments and get back to you. Are there any other things that you wanted to?
Well, you know that the undocumented coverage issues, that's part of the application.
Again, we just didn't have, we couldn't
So that has
get
to be
the,
all straightened out, so we have a clear picture
Right.
of the total coverage, including the undocumented and the new,
right,
and then subtract what you're taking out, and we'll have a clear view of what the coverage is gonna
right.
be.
And again, see, the only reason that wasn't there is we didn't have access. It was difficult to find that
Yeah,
thing.
okay, and if, for the public, pool location is what they're talking about. According to code, the pool cannot be in front of the rear line of the house. Of course, you get into issues when there's 3 streets, so what's the rear? So
Right.
Ed can explain that.
So I think what we're showing in terms of that,
I just want everybody in the room to understand what we're
Yeah.
talking about when it comes to the pool has to be behind the rear of the house, but when there's 3 streets involved, the rear of the house gets, there's only one rear of the
Right.
house.
so what we're line here is considered the rear yard of the house, and we consider this yard the rear, and actually a variance for that would not be necessarily necessary, because the way the code reads, it's the rear yard of the house closest to the front street, so that would be this one. So the pool is actually set behind that. So in terms of the pool location, we, I guess we would ask ZBA to confirm that that's the correct interpretation, but the pool is actually, in terms of location, is probably okay. In terms of its effective rear yard setback, which is the 20-foot pool setback, it's within that. So again, the only incursion is this Broadway buffer piece.
Broadway buffer is important.
Yes.
It wouldn't have been made if it wasn't. Any comment from the public? No comment from the public. Lori?
No.
No comment. No comments beyond what Caesar is going to.
All right.
Yeah, I have a question about the shape of the pool. Going towards Broadway, and it's 35 towards Broadway.
Correct.
What is it right now?
I'm sorry? The pool size is 22 by 35, is that?
So it's oriented into the buffer. Some of the pictures you showed, even though we're in the buffer, are oriented the other way. Right, which...
You mean if you rotated it 90?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, there
Yeah.
seems to be no reason to not, maybe there is, and I don't know.
Right.
But it is oriented in that direction. It's also more towards, actually 22, it's not that bad. I was gonna say it's more square than at the exhibit scene, but
All right.
if there's a reason for the orientation.
There's existing planting and an existing screen and sort of very elaborate work in this area, so the goal was to keep the pool in this other area. And relatively tight to this existing fence now, or it's sort of a trellis-like fence. So, yeah, understood, it could be relocated. It would probably have effect on other systems, AC systems and other things on the site. Again, the only reason we're proposing it is that we don't believe that it has any significant visual impact, because it would not be able to be seen given where it is. If you guys visit the site, you will notice that, whether there's right now some other play equipment in that area, I think the visual impact would be less than what's there now. And so we're sort of treating it as a de minimis incursion, and that's why we would ask for relief.
That's not a very compelling reason, John.
If in fact it's 14 feet, John,
Yeah.
if in fact it's 14 feet, do you consider that de minimis?
Well, it's not 14 feet,
What
because
is
that would be
line,
after
John?
the pool.
The one outside?
That line, bed,
Okay.
that line.
If it's 5 feet, do you consider that de minimis?
Yeah, I do.
So 5 feet out of 30?
50.
Out of 50, 10%?
Yeah,
Right, that, you would consider that de minimis.
right.
And so if you did 5 feet, what would prevent the next person from asking for 7 or 10?
I don't know why, I'm not, the way that the zoning variance request goes, it would have to be based on the merits of the specific proposal. So it's not based on whether someone has done it in the past, it's based on whether there's impacts associated with that specific thing. The zoning board, if you speak to them, they don't use a precedent in that sense as a way to place hold for a future one. It has to do with specific impacts, and if you go through the 5...
Unless it's the first time they're allowing an intrusion into the Broadway buffer for something like this, then they might consider
Right.
precedent. Well, let me follow up on Mike's question, which really is there an alternative location? Even though the applicant may have to give up something, which wouldn't require the intrusion into the roadway buffer.
Yeah, no, I think there is, and I think that's what Michael has brought up, is like basically sliding the mass of the pool to the west, getting it out of the Broadway buffer, that would have impacts on AC systems and other stuff that's already in place. I think once we understand the overall coverage condition and sort of understand what's documented and undocumented, if some of that incursion is to something that's undocumented anyway, you know, it might change the owner's opinion on that. Yeah, no, we understand what the request is, and I think the balancing that the owner is doing now is, you know, if this is considered not de minimis, if someone could say there's a visual impact or a use impact, or there's something that is atypical in the neighborhood, then we would move off. If people on the zoning board agree that this is sort of de minimis and there's no to the right, then we would rather do it here because it's more cost effective and it has less impact on the site.
Don't forget, Michael indicated, you know, the shape of the pool. If it was rectangular, parallel to the main IDP and buffer.
Right. If you extend this way across the front of the building, I think it has a negative impact on this is a very formal classical front. So I think bringing the pool out into this area, I would not recommend, but moving the pool closer to this existing porch and patio this way would make more sense.
You really didn't, so far you haven't given me a compelling reason to go into the buffer.
Caesar, I have a question about the buffer. Is the idea of the buffer that a family using the pool isn't going to make noise to bother people walking on Broadway? Is that the idea of the buffer?
Well, the intent of the buffer was promulgated. Reasoning for it, I don't know. I know it exists, and it's kind of important, otherwise they wouldn't have done it.
I mean, because honestly, my feeling is like that if I was a neighbor, I'd rather the pool be closer to the Broadway side and further from my house on the other side.
I think it had to do more with environmental concerns than noise or even visual. I think they came out of the 2003 comprehensive plan, which is on the village website. You can find it, maybe that would explain it.
And I think, Laurie, that it's a broad, the buffer concerns any activity within it. So it's not just a pool. I mean, the idea of any activity is pretty broad. So the trustees must have thought that we should keep that inviolate.
And in fact, it's bigger. It's 50 feet
No,
if it's
it's
an
only that
existing
buffer.
house. Oh, that's the after that buffer, okay. Sorry. Okay.
Which are the trees that I believe Chairman mentioned need to come out, or you're suggesting come out?
I think what's happened here is that some that are showing to be removed are not showing in the site plan as removed. Let me just check. So these are the removals. So there's a bunch of trees in this area that we're showing removed. They're relatively small, and they're being replaced by better buffering trees. You know, these are sort of mature, you know, not very full evergreens that are sort of clumped together that were not part of any formal planting.
The 21, 23, and 25 are those?
21, 23, and 25 are the ones that I think are in question. And we'll give you a clear, like the arborist, those three trees. If you're on site, you know, the most valuable tree there is the 20 and the 22. You know, these cluster here, we can look and see if it makes sense to keep them.
Yeah, the reason for the question is whether or not the incursion into buffer makes that an even more likely scenario.
Right. I think the issue I have now, not having the arborist on site, is trying to understand the value of those three that we're proposing to remove. Like if they're a scraggly Norway maple that doesn't have a lot of habitat value and doesn't have a lot of visual value, it probably makes more sense to remove it. If it's something that's a native tree that's important, you know, we'll act to work around it. I don't think their removal is required for the pool location that we're showing. So,
If it's not required for the pool location, John,
more to do with clarifying the planting and trying to get a better buffer. Yeah, so I mean, we'll look at it and see the value of these trees. Again, we had a walkthrough scheduled with
They're not small,
arborists.
14-inch, 10-inch, and 18-inch.
Right, right.
And you mentioned the trees to the north are relatively scruffy trees, I think you used the word. My notes say 14-inch, 20-inch, and 28-inch
Right,
to the north, that's not scruffy.
right, but I think in terms of buffering to the yard to the north, sometimes it may be better to take trees that aren't acting as a buffer, out and replace them with something that will do a better buffer. But we can, again, we'll look at all the trees.
You'll have to
Malcolm will give
let
you-
your arborists work it out with.
Yeah, we will, and we'll coordinate with Suzanne.
From my point of view, taking trees down in the buffer is not a good idea, unless you're gonna come up with a super idea to replace them.
Right. I think though there are trees that are quality that add, and you can, showing is like replacing that with a, I think there's a native holly going in there. So like, in some cases, it may be better to update that buffer than to leave trees that are effectively weed trees in place. But we'll make sure.
Well, in replacing trees next to existing trees, digging a hole for a new tree can kill an existing tree, like disturbing the roots, so
Right.
one has to be careful with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of anything that we're proposing, right, we wouldn't be damaging any existing trees to remain.
The stormwater system is in the buffer.
It is. It could be slid out of the buffer. That's fine. I don't think there was limitations on underground work in the buffer, but,
Yeah, just a thought.
yeah.
Any comment from the public?
Where's the pool equipment going?
Or speaking to my phone.
The pool equipment?
The pool equipment is shown in this area here.
No.
Okay.
You're gonna need a variance for that? Is it in the setback?
Pool setback, it's also, it's on the other side of the 20-foot line.
Right. Actually, it will need a variance. That will need a variance.
Well, in addition to the variance, we've had problems with, good question, Lauren. We've had problems with the pool equipment being too close to a property line, creating noise to the neighbor.
Right. I think in most cases, the pool equipment that we would spec now is very low noise. It's not I don't know if there's, that's not a, given the relationship. And there's an existing, I think there's existing.
In the
pool
past
right here.
application, it was a very sensitive issue with noise, and
All right.
there had to be soundproofing around the pool equipment.
And if you do believe that the equipment is quiet, it would probably be good to know what it is, because
Yeah, you can give.
my
you can
experience
give-
is that they're pretty loud. I have myself, and
Right.
even with fence around it, it's pretty loud. So they're brand new.
Okay, so we can provide sound information on that, or we
Okay.
can move it within the buffer. We can move it outside into the pool, onto the pool side.
Dan?
No questions, Cecil. Thank you.
Thanks, Smith.
Nothing further.
Anything further, Michael?
Just one more question. The fence, is that dotted line with little circles to the south there?
So there's the line of the pool fence along this side is here, and then it's going through.
That's proposed,
That's all proposed, yes.
and so that's an intrusion as well.
All proposed. There's an existing chain link fence now within right about here in this location here.
Would it meet pool code?
You could potentially, you'd have to change the fabric on it. Wouldn't be pool fabric,
Yeah, it
it's
would
a
be a
chain
new-
link.
If you're changing, it'll be a new fence in the buffer.
Right, but I think, this we would consider an upgrade. It would be an ornamental metal fence instead of a decaying chain link. I think that would probably be an improvement.
Well, that's another variance.
Well, it's the same variance. It's for encouragement.
Well, both
You have three activities in the Broadway buffer that are individual, at least three. You've got the tree removal, you've got the fence, and you've got the pool.
Drainage.
And drainage.
Is the drainage, is the way that the Broadway buffer is underground work considered part of the?
Still an activity.
It's an activity in the buffer.
You need a variance for it, doesn't mean you're not gonna get it or will get it.
Right, okay. All right.
It's still there.
I mean, you could say pool, you could say pool patio, you could, I mean, there's a lot of activity in the Broadway buffer on this application.
Right, okay.
Mr. Chairman?
You have to come up, you have
Hold on 1 minute.
Turn the air conditioning off?
it's on.
Can you turn it off?
Off.
Sarah, can you lower the thermostat?
You can move to the back if you want.
Okay, John?
Yep, I got it.
Hey,
There's something to say, John, look behind you.
All right. You can't see my facial expressions because of that.
We had a discussion about air conditioning in the room, and it may have interrupted some comments. Anybody, did you miss any comments?
No further comments.
Anything else? Anything from the public besides air conditioning? Okay, thank you, we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Keep in mind about the buffer, John.
Yep.
All right, that little break I spoke about earlier, before we move on to 39 and 50, 39 Fargo and 50 Half Moon. I personally am going to take a break outside, take this net for. Sarah, do we have a restroom?
And then it goes in, please, ring the doorbell. Unless I make you go upstairs.
I'll call ahead. I'll call him, come back.
I'm gonna look up the enjoyable area. I never thought about it, you know, 'cause it's just always been pretty separate, so, but look at that. Yeah.
These two for appearance.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. How are you? Nice to meet you. Very nice. Nice to meet you. Well, I think I have a picture somewhere.
You know what? I'll make you deal if you take the two. So that's pretty much, yeah. Standing on.
And then he and his mother came here because when he was in study, he had to see him walk through history. I guess because so he always was interested in her. He comes back, he does his business. Yeah. Wow. But somebody, he has a lot of.
Listen, I was realizing that's great. It was the disaster.
I brought it down.
Well, there's okay, because he didn't put something on the checklist.
Because the bulletproof
Yeah, the air conditioners aren't on the breakdown. Now, breakdown sheets aren't compliant, they're not on so he's a little just.
just enough for a grade. Just better.
Because everybody's
It's a.
I'm really sensitive.
Got it.
Well, your number might be.
Oh, excellent.
I think I have 2 square feet now. 2 square feet, so we'll do it.
I think you had 8. There were one, it covers 8, minus 3 is 5. Well, everything else is good?
Everything's great. Busy, healthy. What else?
Just horrible work.
Well,
I'll see you around.
you scared me with the last one. It's, I figured I'd go on time.
Of course, I had a friend of
Well, hopefully we'll get through this one. I gotta go to the Catholic on my way.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, no, I think, I don't know if I know that I think we know, but I don't know if you can do
I got one here. I don't like.
would it be on the plan?
I thought these chairs were on the I don't want to.
But the thing is,
I'm like,
Always something.
I know, it's like it's never gonna end.
Always something.
You think what? Sarah. There was a woman on Andrew, the thing that really freaked me out, I was watching Andrew Sleeper the other day, and he interviewed a woman,
it's not the only one.
right around my age, who had been in Provincetown, and she was vaccinated, she was with, I think she was gay, she was her, the friend who was also vaccinated. And she picked up, she got a breakthrough infection, and she wasn't in the hospital anymore, she was sick. And so, he was asking her, do you know where you picked it up? And I was awake when she said she went to one of the bars or something, because I know in the bars, they were supposed to check, the vaccinations, but they weren't.
Start buying things for college?
And she said, they narrowed it down to two of them. One was saying going on a June bus ride, or a June car ride, and with a driver.
You gotta coordinate now.
The driver was in the bus, and with the backseat parking, she was vaccinated.
June buggy was in open air.
I thought they were using more, it might not have been. But it was either that, or in wherever place she was staying, they would have breakfast. And when they went down to breakfast, their usual table wasn't there.
And you think about it, we should.
It's a plan, we're gonna cover it.
So her only contact.
No, that's the site, that's
And
Jason's. Yeah.
they found
That's the site. Right.
because it was a
Also showing it
very
up.
tall man.
Showing up on the other.
And they did a lot of.
Coverage is flat.
What they call it.
So it's on.
We reach out to the people, everybody contact them. And
Plans and they have.
there was a breakdown of just whether you were vaccinated or unvaccinated. You had the same viral load. Vaccinated and unvaccinated. Because they were paying so much for social security, they figured out who applied for that.
Jesus, almost forgot this.
Follow like crazy.
Because you're trying to stay together.
No, Jim.
Later.
Together also.
So maybe you should show the
Yes, move.
Okay, we're back in session. Moving on to number 7 on the list, which would be 2021-21, 39 Fargo Lane.
So, John Malone, Ferguson Lawn Architect, sure. Representing the Leonards. So the limit of our submission this month was an expanded visual impact analysis. When we left last month, we were asked to look at some additional options to try to see if there were some other options that might take the...
Before you go on, John, can I interrupt you? Did you see the latest letters that were submitted?
Oh, we did. They were forwarded us to
Part of your presentation, the Hernandez letter, the Phillips letter,
right.
and
I have
another letter.
I have copies of them. What I thought would make sense would be to go through what was submitted, and then if you would like us to address specific items from any of the letters, we can do that. But I think it would probably make sense for me to just go through what was submitted first and sort of.
Particularly the Hernandez letter with the charts and images that were presented by Mr. Hernandez.
Okay, I don't know if they're on this machine.
They're not. This is only what's submitted. You'll have to address that at another meeting. We can't.
Okay, but I mean, we can still address, I have copies of them here. I think the board
We
is.
haven't had time to review it in context. It was just. Yeah.
Caesar's asking for it. No, I mean, I have the letters here. I have copies of them. I printed them out. Yeah, no, I, you know, what I'd like to do is like, we'll go through the
But
submitted
sooner or later,
information.
you're gonna come up and ask anyway.
Right, sorry, yes. So the body of the visual impact, the previous portion of the thing showed our 3 options that we had initially proposed, which was basically the original version of it, the lowered version of it, and a modified one that aligned the front of the house with the existing house to try to pull the mass of the house even farther forward to test whether the visual impact was better or worse if we, pull the house forward. So the additional options that we've developed, and part of these options are, and we can come back to the images of the impacts that currently proposed. But the additional options, we've developed 5 additional options which are shown here, and I go through each one of them. So the first option that we've developed here is a request that came from a neighbor. I think this was the Hernandez neighbor that said the problem could be solved by simply rotating the house and aligning it with the north setback line. So this option tests that theory. It rotates the house, and also just to be clear, this is the lowered option. So originally we had a house that was a few feet higher, and we lowered it by 4 feet by dropping it into the ground by 2 feet and then reducing ceiling heights. So this rotation that we're showing you is lowered, the lowered version. So, because it's a house that was not designed for this condition, and it's simply it has some deficits, but the deficits associated with this siding relate to, you know, any massing that you did in this area. So it's an interesting thing to test. So the first thing that we sort of address in the comments above about this siding is that the garage location, right? So this garage, where it's shown here, right now the garage access is this way, and to move the garage into this location, what would be required would be a new curb cut coming from the street in this area here. Moving the garage this way, you know, has disruptions. These are mature trees that are on the Fargo line, and we hadn't shown them removed, so they would probably have to be removed, just obviously for that condition. Garage the location of the garage also, relative to the design of the previous house, right? If the garage, if this were to be the front entrance, it would be obscured by the garage, right? There wouldn't be any way to, you know, to see that. It would be a strange sighting for a classical house, obviously, from that. What really the issue with this kind of approach is the way that the house takes the bulk of this line, which was the rear of the house, which had functions like kitchen, family room, you know, basically the living space of the house in the rear portion of the house. It takes all of that function and directs it to the side yard. And it pushes it so close to the side yard that if you had any attempt at buffering between the houses, that the area between the side yard and that buffering would be in the area of about 15 feet. And obviously out of the rear of a house of this scale and a lot like this, you would want to be able to have a relationship to the rear yard, which is quite expansive, and especially by one of the benefits of pulling the house forward, we were going to make the rear yard a feature of living on this site. So you would still have, in this configuration, you would still have access out of the side here, but it's much less than you would along here. It's reduced by about 50% in terms of how much use you could have in here. So you know, that's one of the deficits of anything that rotates in this direction. The privacy of the northern neighbor is really potentially problematic. I think we've had letters from a lot of adjacent neighbors, 4 adjacent neighbors who are concerned about privacy. Putting the majority of the, you know, perimeter of the house, pressing it against this side, in order to provide privacy here, you'd have to have a pretty solid evergreen barrier right here, right? And that, I want people to understand that a lot to ask to do for a house that has a huge impact on the siding of the house. And I think even separate from the buffer, if, you know, you had this neighbor, we have not heard from this neighbor, but I think there would be a concern of, with all this space, why is it pressing within 25 foot of the lot when we've had other people ask, you know, why is, you know, even though we're well within the rear yard setback, there are concerns from rear yard neighbors that some of the development is too close. So that, you know, part of this configuration is the adjacency to our outdoor space. If the majority of the outdoor space that we're going to access for the house is on this side, then you've reduced the amount that you can do there. The relationship to the street is another problem with this house. The majority of the houses are related to the street, or the more classical houses are related to the street in a parallel mode. There is one house to the north to the street in that mode, but Fargo Lane continues in this direction. This house is an outlier and is set very far back in the site. Part of what we were doing to reduce visual impact is keep our house very close to the front of the yard. So you're going to, the incongruency between this orientation and the road is going to read much more than it could read in the case of the house to the north. There's some other examples if you do drive down that street where you could potentially see the side of a house, but there's one, I think, at 96 where you see the side of the house, but the only reason you're seeing the side of the house is that the road is turning at a 90-degree angle, and the house is actually fronted on the long portion of the road, and you do see the side. But in generally, the houses, and the classical houses specifically, are fronted parallel to the road. And that's one of the criterias that, the owner want to pursue. The last thing about this one I just want to touch on is, if we did rely on this portion of the house, put a lot of pressure on that for rear access and rear views, that there would likely be the need to remove additional trees to make that happen. So the tree removal is not really only related to the adjacency to the house, but when you put the house in this position, in order to, and keep it low, as we originally did, which was down at a level 2 feet lower than was originally proposed, you'd have to do a lot of grading to get even any kind of patio out of the back of the house. So that grading would impact tree roots even higher up on the hill. So that's just a quick summary of some of the deficits and why, even though we have this as an option, we didn't consider it one that met the needs of the client. The next option.
Before you go, did you analyze what it does to the view?
And we can. I think what I'll do is I'll show you the options,
Okay.
and then we can go through each of the views.
Okay.
The next option.
And another question. Essentially, you took the original house and just rotated.
Right. So there wasn't a lot of thought.
No change to the house.
Yeah, no change to the house. And I preface this one that it's kind of a dumb approach, because it was just to try to test if there were visual impact benefits to just rotating the house. So obviously we wouldn't design this house the way it was, and some of the deficits that I outlined there, I just would want people to hold those in their mind, because they affect to any house that's in this location.
Yeah, but if you redesign, like you said, the kitchen and stuff is facing that way, facing to the north.
Right.
You could redesign the house and have them face differently, if that was a...
Right. So the option B is exactly what we tried to do. So option B was our attempt to move the mass of the house to the north line, move the house over, keep the house forward, move the garage further back so that the garage didn't lead the house, and then provide a relationship to the street where we had some minimal length along the front facade here to try to reduce the impact. So this was our attempt to take the moving the mass to the front. If we kept the criteria, the base criteria of the owner, which was having a classical relationship to the street, having a relationship to the rear, and we tried to do that by moving it this way. What do we get? And in this version, we ended up with the garage in this area. We could have a formal front here. You could have sort of a side garage court here. In this one, you still would probably have tree impacts, because I think access to the garage would require the removal of these two trees. The problem with this, when we solve the frontage and having sort of a better condition where on the ground floor you could potentially have a living room and dining room facing west, and on the upper floor you could have a master suite facing west. When we fix that condition, we have similar problems in the back, where the garage in this position is taking a very prime location for rear yard access. So when you see the garage right here is, that's a full depth garage, it means that the kitchen, family room activities, and their relationship to the rear yard is still sort of in this area that's very tight, and it's not a good location. And I think a lot of the pressure of this facade against the house to the north is not that great, but the pressure of this facade here against the house is still pretty great. So in terms of privacy, this portion of the house would still suffer a little bit, and I think it's a less than optimal in terms of its relationship to the rear yard. The next thing we looked at is basically a modification of the rotation option. So in this case, if you looked at, remember the option A, one of the main problems with option A is the garage obscuring the front of the house, and the garage being the whole presentation of the house. We tried to see what would happen if we moved the garage back. So this option C has, basically potentially could solve the a few of the deficits of the other one. I think there is a chance that you could get in here without this additional tree takedowns, and I think we indicated that you could potentially, but if this was the garage orientation, you would have to, you would come in this way, you'd have to pull in the garage, and to get out, you'd have to do like a 5-point to get out, because I think in order to keep these trees in place and access from this part, it won't really work. We could change the orientation of the garage on this one and come straight in, but at that point, the entire ground floor that faces west, that faces the river, would be garage, right? There wouldn't be any ground floor opportunities for view. And if you see in this option right now, the only west-facing view that's left on the house is this 10-foot long piece right here, right? The garage is 2 stories, had a space above it, so the space above the garage could be developed as one of the living spaces. But again, it significantly limits any opportunities for views or relationship to the street that way. It doesn't solve the privacy problem. It actually makes it a little worse in terms of its length along the northern lot line. It does slightly improve the rear yard position by a few feet because it allowed us the house slightly forward, but again, it's not, the same condition, the same issues here, and the same issues that we talked about in terms of not having a long frontage to the rear yard, right? This was a siding that we had originally started with the access to with a front courtyard and an access to the garage this way, and a siding further into the hill, and the elevation of the house lifted. Again, this proposal was still under the allowable height limit when we originally looked at it. We show this here because this is really our preferred siding for the house, which we did not lead with. In this option, we had a driveway condition that used the existing curb cut. We had sort of a drive court condition in the front. We looked at the side of the garage rather than the doors, which is, if you have the garage forward of the house, and we still had, the relationship to the front yard here and the relationship to the rear yard here. So this is the version that we had started with that pushed the house further into the hill. So we just are basically showing you what our starting point was even before we submitted and before we did the reduced height. And the last option was, Caesar, you had asked at the last meeting, is there a version of the house that instead of moving it to the north side, is there a version where the mass gets moved to the south? And we try to find, for the northernmost property in the rear, we try to find some path that would provide views for the northern property. So this version, the garage is on this side, the living space is here. It's a much squarer house, and again, the relationship to the rear yard is not great. It wouldn't be our first choice, but we did it mostly as a test to see what would be the visual impact of moving the mass of the house to the south. So there's language in there that sort of outlines all of these things. So the other thing we produced is a view corridor study to sort of explain what the difficulties in. The view corridors that are shown here are
Can I just interrupt you 1 second?
Yeah.
And of those options, A, B, C, D, and E,
Yeah.
which one are you leading?
I think at our point, we still think option 2, which was what we presented in the earlier, which was the lowered version.
So it's none of these?
It's none of, we don't feel that any of these are an improvement at the moment, and when we look at the view impacts, you'd see why. But none of the options that we looked at, we think, are better than the option 2 that we showed last time, which is what's currently presented. So these are showing, again, we analyzed 1 point from each of the neighbor's house, right? The view, there's other windows, there's other points that we couldn't have analyzed. But what we're showing you here, these are the view corridors that were established by the photographs that were provided. The view corridors were actually of the photographs, they're actually much wider than what's shown here. We're being very conservative in terms of narrowing it down because it didn't make any sense to show them as wide as a view quarter. But it shows you is the extent to which the overlapping views from the various houses and where their view impacts are cover the entire lot. And part of what we were trying to test here is there some other location on the lot where the house could be built that would be outside of the light blue area, right? Is there some place that we're missing? And the area that it's identifying is this uphill location right here, right? But that uphill location is very narrow. So, you know, if you did some kind of wedge-shaped, very narrow wedge-shaped house further up the hill, you know, there might be some high modern or very contemporary approach that you could do that. I think based on the comments of the neighbors, I think there's also concern about the development moving up the hill. And the thing that is missing from this is if you added additional views from these houses, additional view corridors beyond that, beyond the ones that we're showing, the impact in this area would be similar, right? Like if you added a view corridor that came from this house or a view corridor that came from the family room of Hernandez's house, that would fill this thing that looks like an opportunity here. So this is, again, kind of shows you what the condition is of the view corridor and why it's difficult for us to find locations to put the second floor that won't have some significant view impacts, right? You can sort of see what the limitations are on that. So then if we jump to the photographs that were analyzed, for just in general, we discussed this before, from two of the properties, there are no significant summer views. From the center property, there is some limited summer views. So what we're talking about in general is partial winter views, right? There aren't any significant views from the summer from any of the properties that we're analyzing. So there's no really difference in the summer. So this is from Hernandez's property, which is the property furthest to the south. And you can see, you know, we've shown the existing house just to orient you. You can see that options A and C have the most benefit for Hernandez. So right now, the view that would be impacted from the development that we're showing in option 2, our current proposal, affects the view from this point only to the north. So right now, this whole view to the south is protected from this point, and the only impact that our current proposal has is in this area here, right, if you sort of view the view area. So the rotation of the house...
John, I'm sorry, what color is yours?
The proposal is not in this one because it was too much to do, so we can go back and forth to that. I was just sort of trying to clarify where that was, and we can flip back and forth. But so the three options, the orange option, the blue option, and the green option, all have greater impact on this view than the current proposal. So of the two options that we looked at that have an improvement to this view are the two options that we don't think is feasible. One of them is not really feasible, it's just a flat rotation of the house. And the other one, option C, is kind of the least feasible, has the most deficits of any of the options that we looked at. So, you know, the question would be, would it be...
Hold on, the blue is option C, the dark blue?
Dark blue is option C, yeah.
So I know it's hard to see where, okay, that has the best view, least obstructed view.
Right, from this
Appears to be
location.
From this location.
Right, from this location.
But you said it also has, that's what the current design of the house. The design of the house was changed instead of just rotating the proposed house. That's what rotating the proposed house.
Yeah, that was rotating the proposed house and also moving the garage out of the way. Okay. So like it basically is a garage that is fully rotated, aligned with the north property line, and its front is a garage across the entire ground floor.
That's your option C.
That's the option C. And that, again, that's not something that we were seeing as feasible, but we were showing it just to test the impact.
Not feasible because?
Well, not feasible because it's an inappropriate siting of a house for a myriad of reasons, right?
Inappropriate siting of the current design of the house.
No, this is a revised design. This one that we're talking about, C, is a revised design. We don't think it would be appropriate to have the front of the house be a garage.
I think what Caesar is saying
Right.
is that it's still the classic, it's still a classic design for the house. You're taking that design, same design, and having altered the rotation and altered where the garage is, but otherwise, it's the same look of the house.
We didn't,
That's what-
I think that's where we're starting, and that's why when I started, I wanted to say, like, the pressures and the deficits that we talk about would affect any house. Like, so the pressure to the north lot, the pressure to the problems with the rear yard, the pressure with the access, that massing, it doesn't matter, whether we really focus on that. If we were in a situation where we had a narrow lot, and the only place to put the house was there, you could potentially design, there are houses in LA where the garage is the front and the lot is 25 feet wide, and you walk around the garage and up, there's a solution for that, but given this lot, that's not an appropriate siting for the house.
Now, given the view preservation code.
Right, but I think
We're not
the
in
view,
LA.
right. We're not now, well, the view preservation
Right.
code, I think, we can. talk-
John, just a quick question. How far back is it, the proposed house from the current location of the old house, distance-wise?
How far back from the road?
Yes.
It's
Old
closer,
versus
it's
new.
closer to the road than what is being proposed now. Oh, no, the new, our current proposal?
Correct.
Our current proposal is, the garage is in a location of the existing house, it's a little bit forward of the existing house, the facade is a little bit back from the existing house.
A little, you mean, how many feet maybe?
The garage is 50 feet from the road, so it's about 10 feet closer to the road than what it is, and the house is about 10 feet back from the
From the
current
existing,
house,
okay.
right.
Thank you.
And this proposal, the blue house, the garage would be right up to the front.
Okay.
So right up to the setback. So there is benefit, again, there's view benefit for these partial winter views of these, again, we're saying infeasible houses, but that view benefit is only from here to here. So if you tried to quantify this, if the overall view was 100%, and, the part that we're talking about here is maybe 25% of that, it maybe would be a slight increase, that 25% increase, and then if you try to quantify it further by saying it's a partial winter view, that 25% would be, for how often this view is there. Because again, if we look at what the summer view condition is, right, there is no view there.
Can I interrupt for a second?
I think I would,
Let them finish first. Thank you.
So this is the same options that we're showing here for the middle position, the McLaughlin house. And you can see option A, there is a slight improvement where there is some view that is opened in this area here. And for A and B, but the other options that we're looking at there, oh wait, I'm looking at the wrong photo, hold on a second. So, in the winter view situation, there is the houses that we looked at where we moved the mass to the south, there is a benefit in this area over here. And the fully rotated house, which are the A and C options, there's a benefit in this area. The other options, the uphill option and the uphill option and the reconfigured version, which is option B, there's no benefit there. And then from the last position, you can see the rotated houses there's no improvement from this is the Croup house, so this is the house furthest to the north. There's no improvement over what we're currently proposing to the view from those locations. And the one that is the real improvement for the Croup position is option E, which is the attempt to move the mass of the house to the south. So in that case, if we were looking to try to get a peek through here and protect that thing and removed the house to the south, that would have a significant impact on the other views, specifically the Hernandez view, right? So the Hernandez view, that's the green line here. right? So it would have an impact on views that way, but it would for both the middle position right here and the Krupp's position here. It would have a potential benefit there. Right.
What was the green, which letter?
So that, if I go back to the plan, is
Which, the green was which option, which letter up?
so it's option E. So it's this option where we move the mass of the house to the south. So moving the mass of the house to the south again would put more pressure on the house to the south. Again, it's suboptimal compared to what we have shown in terms of the garage and all that relationship. But what it highlights is that the moving the mass to the north is really an improvement for one of the lot lines. It's an improvement for that. And again, the improvement is not, it's not like the house that we're proposing, especially with the dropping in height, ignores that view. So from the Hernandez position, the house that is being proposed already protects, let me go back to the first half. The house that's being proposed already protects the views from this tree over, right? So the benefit of rotating the house from that position, and again, the rotated house is not an option that we can move forward with because, it has too many deficits, but just in terms of understanding, the improvement to the Hernandez is from here to here, right? It's this portion here. Right, and it doesn't have a benefit to the other two positions, right? So I think, the condition that we're in right now is we're balancing the needs and the appropriate siting of a house and all the criteria associated with that with the view preservation. And at this point, we still believe that the proposal that we have is the best balancing of that because the house actually works and the siting of the house allows us to do things that make sense, like access a rear yard and not have privacy issues with the neighbors to the north. And we've, just to back up a bit, the house is below the allowable height. The proposed house is below the allowable height limit by 20%, right? It's 7 foot lower than what is allowed. It is not over in terms of coverage or FAR. It is within all of the setbacks, and it is consistent with the neighborhood in terms of its size, right? So if the only criteria in designing a house was protecting the views of the neighbor, existing partial winter views of the neighbor, then you might be forced into a position where you're building something that doesn't work on the site for a whole host of other reasons. But I think our understanding is that the view protection law is about making sure that the views are taken into account, and to the least amount feasible, you address them. It doesn't mean that the house has to be entirely beholden to the views and no other criteria matter, whether it's site access or drainage. And the house that's being proposed that has been lowered, that actually improved the views, there's a lot of impacts that are associated with that. Lowering it in the ground means that the stormwater system is going to have to be. It's a more complicated project already, and again, we did show the option of where we originally wanted it at the 35-foot height max. It would have much greater impact. So I think in terms of the starting point from where we are to where we are, we have done our best to try to mitigate that. But again, to focus on this one image, the notion that we can build a second story in this area without having any visual impact, given the relationship that's shown in these view corridors, I think that's I don't think that's the intent of the law. I think the intent of the law is to make sure that it's been that it's been reviewed, that we've looked at other options, but I don't think the intent of the law is to build something that's not a feasible option in terms of the criteria that would typically be involved with siting a house.
Just for clarity, John, go back to those pencil diagrams, the colors. Color, you obviously have a preferred option right now,
Right, so our preferred option is what's currently submitted, so that is,
which is what color, and can you do the 3 charts again?
it's option 2 here.
Okay, can you do, just for clarity, because you're going through color this, color that, and just run through which color is your proposed, and do the 3 views that you have on your charts here.
Okay, so I think for this one, for the proposed is shown in these.
What color is proposed?
A light blue.
Light blue.
Which house is that from 19?
Yeah, oh, this is from Hernandez, is that 19?
19.
Yes, so that's the view from 19.
The light blue.
Light blue, yeah. Point B, this is the light blue.
You blow it up a little more.
Yeah. Again, so this area hasn't really been able to address with any of the options, and again, that's sort of right
The
down.
light blue does nothing for the view.
Right. So again, the green has a, oh wait, hold on a second. I'm looking at the.
Don't confuse me, we're sticking with the light blue.
The light blue, right, light blue. And for croup, again, the area that we protected by, so the dark blue was the original proposal, the light blue is the current proposal, right, where we dropped the height of the house, and that actually had a pretty significant impact on this view, where the hillside was obscured, and now you have a peak of water in the hillside beyond. So those are the conditions that we're proposing.
Which diagram is light blue?
Light blue is this, on the plan, you're saying, Susan?
Yeah.
This is it, the siding. So again, that's its relationship to where the existing house is. It's pulled back slightly from where the existing house is. And again, when we looked at, the earlier version of this, one of the reasons we pulled it back is that by pulling it back into the lower area, you have into this crux had the greatest benefit. When we pulled it forward, there was no benefit.
John, can you just go back to option 2? And so, and the garage is located right there.
Yeah, the garage is forward. And again, you see, like the earlier version that we had, the house was further up the hill, the garage was rotated.
And so, the garage, green box.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So it's mirroring that.
Yeah, which is not a great condition.
What do you mean?
It just, we try to find a way to not have the garage most forward. Like, we want the first thing you see not to see 2 garage doors. But again, I think we looked at the one, we showed you that when we tried to make the drive courtyard, that was one of the options, I think option D that we looked at here. That was the original option we looked at, and it pushed the house so far up the hill in order to make that change that we didn't think that was the right way to approach the view impact.
I'm going to ask something which is totally, is there an alternative where there is no garage?
I think I don't think that would be appropriate for a house of this size. I think if there's a requirement of 2 garage spaces on this lot, so I think we have to have garage.
There's a maximum.
Maximum garage
Yeah,
cars.
there's a requirement to have 2 compliant parking spaces, not the front yard setback.
Not in the front yard. Right. So you could have a parking area in the front of the house.
You could have a parking, but you can have a parking area past the front yard setbacks.
Right, right. Which is where the garage is now. You could have a parking area where the garage is now, or you could have a parking area. I think a house of this category, would need a garage. If you think of it as a real estate asset, you'd have to see what benefit there would be to not having a garage.
Lori?
This is such an impossible situation because the neighbors aren't going to be happy with any change. I mean, it's like change. I think siting the house sideways with the front door going, that makes no sense to me. I know you showed it just because it's, to help with the view impact, but it's Fargo. I mean, I've been on Fargo dozens of times. I wouldn't want a front door going to the side. I think you've shown us, like, this is what, your 4th or 5th meeting here, at least?
Yeah.
You've shown us so many options. There's going to be impact. It's just a matter of, is it reasonable impact? And have you mitigated enough of the, of the problems? There's not going to be an easy solution. In New York City, people buy air rights. So this should be a 2-story house on this beautiful lot, on this beautiful street. And I don't think you're asking too much in terms of space and FAR and all of that. And I think that's, that's a big part of it too.
That's why we get paid all the big bucks. Not easy. Dan?
John, you said the viability of moving it closer to the street really wouldn't solve anything?
We did a test in this first round, and the hill goes down like this and then flattens out.
Okay.
So what ends up happening is as you move the thing closer to the street, the sight line, it effectively lifts it. Even though it's a little further away, it effectively lifts it. So the area that we positioned the house, originally we had the house up here. The area that when we did that, that's when we realized we positioned the house in this lowest point. That's where we can get the lowest visual impact. So that's what's shown here in blue, and that's the current option in front of us.
And the practicality of moving the garage to the south side, would that?
I think the setback condition, I think the garage to the south side is, let me show you that one, because we did do that one. The garage to the south side is, wait, here it is. It's this one. We had moved the garage portion to the south side because of the way that the lot works.
Okay.
You can't really just do like a mirror because of the setback condition.
Okay.
So this was the orange one, and again, this one had more view impact to the Hernandez site and didn't have any crucial benefit, I think, to the, so that's why we moved off that one.
Okay.
Mike Smith?
So, John, as you know, I'm not an architect. And so, but my understanding is that an architect's duty is, or charge, is to take the configuration of its lot and be able to design something within the zoning laws, whatever the restrictions are, to try to achieve whatever the client would like. And so the challenge here is you have an irregularly shaped lot with a lot of other issues to it, including that it slopes out. You have, and you have this overlay of the view preservation district. And so you've chosen a style of house and stuck with that. And now we're trying to fit that somewhere on this lot. So I want to return to the language of the view preservation code, which is that the planning board shall also review the proposal in a VP district as to the best siting, dimensions, and configuration of principal and accessory structures so as to cause the least possible obstruction of the view of the Hudson River for neighboring properties and adjacent public property and rights of way. Now, I wish I had a whole lot of legislative history to guide me on what the hell that means, but I don't, so I only have the words in front of me. And it talks about the best siting, dimensions, and configuration. So my question is, no matter where I wind up, don't I have to consider other styles and other designs on this property in order to be able to say that I've considered the best siting, dimensions, and configuration to cause the least possible obstruction? I may ultimately agree with you that your option 2 might be the best one, but don't I have to consider something other than your classic style, because you're trying to take, and I know it's a bad analogy maybe, you're trying to take a square peg and put it in a round hole.
Right, so that's why I think the way I started was to say that the deficits that we're describing for option C and option A I'm going to let go because that was the simple rotation. The deficits that I'm describing for option A are not related to the style of the building. They're related to massing and siding of the building, right? So a lot of what drives the residential layout has to do with access, right? Locations of the garage. It has to do with grades and where stuff can be and the impacts of changing grading. So that the massing of the house associated along that north line, whether it's a high modern house or a classical house, some of the things maybe fall away, like in the issue of the front door. If you could have your garage door be your front door and you could walk around the garage, potentially that would fall away in a modern house. The client does not want to do that, but the other deficits, like the privacy to the house to the north, the access to the rear yard, the configuration relative to the street, those don't fall away. And then again, if you look at some of these strategies, I mean, I think the visual impact of that a house on the middle 2 lots, there's no benefit. Again, this is a visual impact that's a partial river view that is a winter river view, partial winter river view. It's not a view that they have all year round. So if you take that impact and you balance it against the impacts that it would have on the house, like this is a significant endeavor that someone is putting in here, and it's something that's going to be there for a very long time. And we've all been in houses that are put together the wrong way, right? Like you don't want to have a situation where for this one criteria, and I'm not saying that it's not a valuable criteria, I'm just saying that I understand it is that criteria, visual impact on neighbors, needs to be balanced in the broader sense of what needs to happen for the house, right? And the deficits that were described for option C are not related to the style of the house. And I think, and that's why I wanted to show this in a more abstract mode. The deficits and the difficulties on this lot have to do with any massing, right? It has to do with any mass. And I think moving the house and pressing it up against the north line has certain benefits for the Hernandez property in terms of visual impact. It doesn't have significant benefits for the other 2 property holders, and it has negative impacts on both the neighborhood as a whole, the character of the neighborhood as a whole, and also the character of the relationship of the house to the neighbor to the north. It has a huge negative impact that way.
So what you're saying is that taking the location of your option 2, you could not design, there could not be another design of a house in that same location that would provide more visual relief.
Right. I think the issue is really the second, compared to what's there now. There's a house in approximately that location now. It's the second floor. It's the fact that we are putting a second floor on this house. That's the impact. And again, if you look at what that is, the views are across the entire lot, the impacts across the lot. So any portion that I pick it up, and you could argue
so
that.
Let me ask you this. Would you be able to show, for illustrative purposes, what adding a second story simply to the existing house would do to views from 17, 18?
Yeah, I think I actually have that. So that's very similar to, oh my God, I don't know why.
So the thumbnail's up, John.
Oh yeah, that would actually help. There you go. So if you look at our first option here, the green option here, so this is part of our the three that we gave originally. So we had one that was called Align with Existing, which is basically putting moving the house forward so that it aligns with approximately where the red house is right now. So the existing house is here. It's not exactly a second floor on the existing house, but it's a second floor in the area of the existing house. And of the impacts, that would be the aligned option. That would be the green. So you see for the Hernandez property, a second floor on the existing house affects this whole area here, where again the light blue is what our proposal is. Does that make sense? Right. So that would have impact. If the house was potentially less wide, I don't think it would have, but you just have to imagine this red line moving straight up, which is kind of similar to what's shown here on the green one. This green option here, the aligned one, is the lowered option, right? It's not higher than what it's already lowered to what we think it's 2 feet into the ground. The ceiling heights have come down, so it's already the lowered option. So a second floor on the existing house, say if it was something as simple as that, would have this level of impact.
Look at the other two, huh?
Yep.
15 and 17.
That's the impact on the center house. There's a little bit of a better condition because we have a lowered wing over by the garage, so there would be negative impact on Hernandez, but less on this one. And then on Croup, for this position, it's similar to the proposed. So whether it's pulled forward or not, you'd have the same view condition here. So I guess if what you're asking, Mike, is for that option of pulling it further forward, you would potentially gain what I would say would be not a great view, a minor view from the middle. Yeah, I'm not sure would be considered a great river view. You gain a minor river view there, and you'd have, the impact of the space between the light blue line and the green line on this view from the Hernandez side. Right.
I think if George was here to amplify what Mike Smith said, you got to sculpt the building into the property.
Well, and this is why
George were.
Yeah, I think that's why I return to this limitation that we have. Right. So and that's the point of these. And I think again you have to understand that these view impacts are narrower. These view corridors are narrower than actually what the image impacts are. So it would be great to have, like a project where you were trying to sculpt something into the landscape, but the opportunities to do that I think are not there, right? There isn't an opportunity that would have a better view impact. And again, it comes back to, that area of the lot, which is the lowest area of the lot. Adding a second floor is what is having the impact. What we're trying to do is lower the house, again, 20% lower than what is allowed by code, and we're trying to adjust the dimensions to the extent we can to try to reduce that impact. I think the greatest beneficiary of the changes that we've had in the location of is probably the Hernandez site. We just have had a hard time finding any way to protect those views. I think the other two houses, one of the reasons it's hard for the Croup site, which is the site furthest to the north, is because they don't have river views, or we're not discussing potential river views that they have over their neighbor to the north, our neighbor to the north. So part of what's happening here is that the Croup house, it would be better to look at the whole map. Right now, the Croup house is showing us that they have a view corridor that's sort of going this way. So the rear, the river is, the river is from here to here. There's a, 90 degrees of potential river view. Their river view is blocked by this house. It's blocked by existing plantings. Their potential for river view across this property is blocked by earlier development, or, so that the fact that we're holding on to this one little bit, I know that's crucial, but that's part of our struggle with trying to find it, is that there's, we're focusing only on the potential for river view across our lot. That's just another limitation that we have. And again, I think the reason that I feel like we've addressed the impacts on 19 to the best we can. 17, I think the reason we're really having struggle is because the The view impacts to 17 are straight over the top of the property. And it's very hard to get nothing in that area. That's why even when we rotate the house, there's still impacts on 17. And, you know, the possibility of protecting views from 15, you know, we can slide we do have some options where we try to slide the mass of the house to the south, but it has, you know, much more significant impacts on 19 than the benefit that it has to 15, if that makes sense.
All right, John, let me, Michael Bafuco.
In this area, are there other similarly shaped lots that have tried to site this type of house? I know there are a number of colonials in the area. Like I look at this and I see to the north, that's a more modern home, I believe, and it's rotated similarly. I can't really see the outline of the rest of that lot, but I assume it's more similar than the one to the south. Which is that no, there's one to the south that's a colonial. Is that
Right. The house to the south is like a Georgian, like.
Right. But if you look at that lot, it's much more suited to that. It's right. And
Right.
So,
And if you look at the length of the frontage of that, right, compared to what the rotated length that we're looking at, right, like the length of our rotated options versus the length of this is much closer to the width of our proposed house than it is to what we're showing in terms of rotation.
my point of bringing this up is those houses, or the house to the left, it had a house that size, right? If you rotated that 90 degrees, it might be a problem, and that's what you're proposing, is a rotation of 90 degrees. They moved it for minimal exposure, right? It is the shorter side of the house is facing the street. This lot, I just wonder, you know, the hard part is to kind of what you were saying is this an ideal lot for this type of house, right? Like other colonials that look this way, that require and are meant for that formal frontage on the street, usually you see those in like a more square open lot, not something like this. So we're kind of saying, you know, this is a design, it has to be like this, and there's no other way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I was saying. I think again, the deficits that I was outlining don't have to do with it being colonial. I think there are a few deficits which we talked about, right, which is having a front that is accessible and has a front facade. But again, the rotation, the long, thin option C, the deficits that I discussed about the relationship to the lot of the north, those are all related to the massing. Yeah,
I agree with you. And I think that option 2 is I'm a fan of it. But I'm also thinking about the precedent that we're setting for, we have other view preservation for the next one after this, and what you show in terms of what's been considered and is going to start to set the precedent for what everybody else has to do. And I do think that your point of, you know, hey, like there is no second-story, two-story house that can go on this property, any shape, any design, any kind, that to me is the best case for, like, there is no way out. Right. I'm not 100% sure that, I'm interested in everybody else's opinion. Has that been demonstrated? That there is no way any two-story house is going to fit on here without impacting views the way this house does. And I think demonstrating that, then it's well, you design the house however you like, because unless we're going to say you can't put a two-story house, views are going to be impacted.
I mean, there's a lot of options now. There's 5 options that we've shown, and there are subtle differences between the view impacts between various ones. And like I think, again, our focus has been on, what we can do for 19. And again, one of the reasons we can do more for 19 has to do with, the space between where our house is being proposed and the potential for river views is greater, right? Like if you sort of see where that is, there are views to the west or between the area that we're proposing and the house to the south. The reason we're having trouble with impacts to 17 and 15 is because their views of the river are right over the top of the existing. And
you definitely demonstrated that this design, anyways you slice it, like you picked the best one. I think the question for me is it completely clear that even if you did change the design, you also wouldn't get anywhere, right? Another two-story house designed another way is going to have the same visual impact it's just gonna look a different house, right? The second floor, the second story is gonna be a certain height, no matter what, however you design the house. Not sure if, you know, the options you've shown necessarily demonstrate, like, doesn't matter about the design, that, you know, like, there's no, like, this is a second story house, it's, I don't know, what's the top of a second story house?
Well, 25 feet.
Right, so like, you know, 25 feet is right here, right? And so anything that, you would have to have a two-story house that's below that in order to not impact the views from those houses. And that's
Just sort of a simple diagram that sort of says, this is the line of 2 stories, right? This is the line of 2 stories.
There's no two-story option
Right.
that we're not going to impact the view.
Right.
So it doesn't matter what the design of the house is.
Right.
Because they're all going to rise to this, to this height.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the stuff that we've shown, you do sort of see that the light blue line that we're sort of focused on is kind of that horizon where it's very hard for us to below. Then the discussion becomes about the sides. Like, you know, as we move left and right, as we move one way, the Hernandez property gets better condition, and as we move the other way, the group property gets better condition. So, you know, for us, that's the subtlety of looking at specific designs. And we also we did put up 2 designs that we considered were not feasible. We did that because there were specific letters asking for that, so we didn't want to ignore those 2 options. But we also don't want to show it doesn't fit action in it, right? Because, you know, that's sort of the joke of the super tall buildings where there's not, you know, by the time you put the elevator in it, there's, you know, 5 square feet left, right? There's certain massings that just, you know, will not work.
Okay, I think we've,
You just have one,
go ahead,
one more question.
Mike Smith.
Yeah, John, so on the original proposal, what was the ceiling heights on the first and second floor?
I think the original had 10 and 9.
And on option 2?
I think it's 8, 6, and 9, I think, is 8, 6. Oh, no, it's effectively 8, but we're going to do a cathedral on the second one, so it's 8, 6, and 9 is where we are.
Okay.
And we also we're dropping it 2 feet into the ground, which, you know, it has an impact on a house, especially a classical house, like relative to the street. We can't go any farther without it actually being depressed and actually water running into the
Ranch?
What the ceiling heights are? They're 8 foot in the ranch, yeah.
Okay, I think it's time, we all commented on the board, it's time to hear from the public. Do we have a public? We got a big public, 4 of us. I'll take a shot in the dark and call for Hernandez.
Alex Hernandez, 19 Meadowbrook Road. I trust you've all read my letter. I wanted to just highlight that there are alternatives that in moving the mass and concentrating in a different location, you know, one, alleviate the views that are being taken from my family room.
Excuse me, is it possible, Sarah, that his letter can be brought up on that screen? No, okay.
Okay. So if you have it, images, and I colored in option 2 and option C. Option 2 being that which is proposed, and option C being...
Option 2 being the light blue.
Yes.
Okay. Being the light blue. And option C being the scenario that, for numerous reasons, they're stating is not desirable, but is in fact possible. Now, I appreciate many of the concerns that are raised here. You know, I don't necessarily think that that's the house that they should build. It's just that it's something that, you know, you need to balance that, right? And it does provide the opportunity to create scale and mass in a location that is less impactful to my view and to 17. And equal to slightly better for 15.
15 being crop.
Being crew.
Can I ask you to address John, this are of option C?
Yeah.
So do you have an opinion on why his analysis of the deficits of option C is either correct or incorrect?
Well, I
You
think
remember what they are,
yeah, so in my letter,
Could be remedied.
in my letter, I wrote them all out.
Hang on, but just articulate.
Yeah, I'm gonna try. So,
Your letter.
you have a copy of it?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, so the deficits were essentially that the garage obscured the front entrance, it is too forward in the lot. He was referencing that from option A and applying it to option C. It doesn't apply to option C. It doesn't obscure the front of the house in option C. And the next point was that it would require a new curb cut and remove trees along Fargo Lane. Option C does not require that. Option A did. The majority of the living spaces are facing the side yard and would have limited opportunity for view and natural light. This is kind of like the crux of the discussion, right? Is like, you know, we presently have river views, and those views are going to be meaningfully impacted, as are those from 17 and 15.
Well, would you agree that analysis about most of that life activity, I forget the words that he used, I'm just using facing 41 Fargo, because I went, you know, I went to the site, and I'm trying to picture the house oriented that way along the line with 41 Fargo. And if I was at 41 Fargo and I had this house looking at me, it would impact both. It would impact both the occupants of 39 Fargo and the occupants of 41 Fargo.
Well, it's actually quite similar to the way that 41 Fargo is oriented. And the way that they've dealt with it is that the roof is this way, in like an A, and it provides, did you picture 41 Fargo?
I
don't know if that's, if you
I
can bring
don't
it up.
have it. I only
And there's actually only,
what was submitted.
and there's actually only like 3 or 4 windows on the side of 41 Fargo facing towards south. And it's actually the garage and the driveway. So there's actually I believe there's less pressure there than you might find if you moved the house up the hill.
But I think part of what you're, just for the impact, first for the impact on 41 Fargo, is this is the red outline is where the house is now.
Right.
Relative for, and what we're proposing to do, what you would propose to do in option C would be to put the mass here. You know, that's a big change for 41
Right.
Fargo. And then also just quickly for the impact that it would have on 39 Fargo, you point out that that's sort of the garage and service and asphalt entrance
Right.
associated with the house. So you would be putting the length of our living space viewing against, you know, a garage,
Yeah, but
garage
Johnson,
air
see,
view.
you're putting the living space against 39, but that's the way the current design of the house is. The living space being there, it doesn't have to be there.
Oh, no, it does, because the mass, in order for the mass to be thin and stay along that line and get out of the views associated with 19, it has to have more length along that side. And so the length along that side is how you get access to the outside, how you get views, and how the rooms are oriented. You can't, if you have a rectangle, like a long rectangle, you can't take all the uses that are associated with that long line and stuff them all, face them west, because you don't have the length to do that. It's not simple. There's not enough, like, sort of secondary uses that could
Obviously,
populate that
nothing is
length.
simple.
Yeah.
And thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to voice concerns here. And there's another opportunity, which I'm just going to go off script here, of what about potentially leaving, you know, a first floor for essentially the existing structure, and then mitigating this, you know, concentrating the scale into the location that we're talking about, and therefore like alleviating bulk there. Right? So it's kind of like a hybrid L. And you know, just point being that there's not presently views where the existing house is, which is 1 story, right? The house blocks those views, and then having the scale be concentrated on the northern side, but having it be less scale mass because you've pulled it down into the first story that's existing.
So one of the options that we developed was kind of that one, where we tried to keep the lower portion of the building over here and move the mass over. It's not exactly what you're being described, but we did look at options like, what's the benefit of putting some kind of lower structure over here, and it still had significant view impacts. That's not a 1-story structure, but again, you know, there were problems with this one that we talked about earlier. But we have looked at a massing that sort of moved that, and it didn't have a good impact on their Hernandez property. And I think even this line of that version, if you see here, even if this portion was the one-story portion, the garage was one-story portion, and we left this portion two-story, you see that impact, that visual impact related with this two-story would be similar. So that was one of the things that came out of that.
But what if the one story was,
Speak into the microphone, please.
sorry, what if the one story was forward, where it exists now, and the concentration of bulk would be smaller and reoriented similarly along
Right.
the...
So I think, you know, what you're describing is you'd have, you know, a massing of the C that your option here, and then you'd have a massing of the one story that would fill in this little area here, so you'd have a long, thin house there with a one story there. I just, you know, the issue with that is that we also need a garage, we need, you know, like it, I don't think I don't believe that there would be a benefit to that, but I mean, again, this is the thing, again, I would come back to, I should let you guys finish your comments.
Sorry, so I just want to highlight that a lot of these issues are brought up by coverage, right? And I think that the opportunity exists to alleviate coverage issues to stretch out the bulk of the home. It was one of the things that I mentioned in one of my earlier letters. But
Actually,
based on...
They meet coverage.
Yeah.
I know they need
The code
coverage.
is covered, they don't need a
I know
variance.
we know, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, that is covered.
no, my point is to use, to modify the way that the coverage is being deployed,
Oh, okay.
right, between hardscape, et cetera, and take that bulk out of the second floor by stretching out the structure.
We could ask for, you're asking to say we could ask for a variance of 20% for coverage and try to look at designs that require variance. Oh, we could ask for, we could look at versions that, you know, require variances, is basically what he's saying,
No,
variances for coverage.
that's one point, but even without requiring variances, there's things that could be done.
We talked about that.
Yeah. That's possible. That may be more beneficial, a variance request for coverage that is minimal to preserve height, to preserve views, I should say, might be more beneficial. That should be an option to look at.
So that's a very risky approach, I would say, first of all, right? Because the threshold for the variance is there an option that you can do where you don't need a variance, right? That's sort of the basis of a variance request.
But if I'm not saying that they will, but if the planning board thought that it would come up with a better design that would be more protective of the view, they would write to the zoning board and say, you know, we spent so many meetings considering this, and we recommend that you grant the variance. You're right, that doesn't mean that they will necessarily, but I would think that it would have some impact on the zoning board.
We're trying to balance two different codes. And to preserve one code, we may need a variance on another.
Is there a design that the applicants would be happy with, that if this was done, they would be happy with?
Well, this is all hypothetical right now.
My fear is that we're saying, you do a variance, do coverage, we're back into the, like, moving everything around.
Right.
You're just gonna come back and
Yeah,
say,
what
"We don't wanna do it that way."
what worries me is that in the abstract, we can continue to say that there must be some other option that solves all of this problem, right? And you can continue to say that in the abstract. We've looked at it
Well, I
very
think we
closely.
all understand it's not going to be a perfect world.
Right, but I think
everybody
talking
was,
about this in the
gonna get
abstract
bored a little.
is concerning, right? Because you could continue to work, like we would keep coming here and there's, oh, well, isn't there some other abstract approach? And then you could put, you know, another effort into, and it wouldn't necessarily have impact.
That's kind of why I'm asking the
Yeah.
question, which
Yeah.
is, you've been very clear that there's a design that we want, and if that design cannot be met, even by going for a coverage variance, then we're gonna be back in the same place.
Right.
Right,
Right.
I just wanna avoid
Right, exactly.
sending you out to do that, and then you to come back again with designs and say, we did it, we made it look like a, queue this time, and, but we don't want that, and
Right. Right. I think there is definitely having the majority of the living space facing 41 and having that 25-foot line, like basically a wall along that, facing that thing, is not something that the owner is going to do, right? They're simply, that's not the house that they want to build, and they wouldn't build that house simply to accommodate the neighbor's view preservation, right? It wouldn't be worth it. Again, you know, it's a $1.9 million project. It's not something that you would build. right?
But my question would be, is that the scaling and siting of, is that the siting of this scale that minimizes the impact to the neighboring views?
I think
I think what we need to do is that Mr. Hernandez's letter had compelling images that need to be looked at by yourself, John.
Yeah, I did look at them. See, I don't think they're gonna, there's
Well, I
nothing.
think you need to look at them seriously and come back with some, so we can put them up on the screen and get your comments, because some of those options,
I think the benefits that were shown in those images, again, have to do with the project that we think is not feasible, right, for the reasons
have
that
to
we
look at it.
described. Right.
But feasible or desirable?
Well, there's a sense
That's
of
a
with
good
something,
word.
there is, in a situation like this, right, just because something can be dropped on the light doesn't make it feasible, right? Like, if you get to a situation where the layout of the house won't work, that doesn't make it feasible just because, you know, you can make a house with all those deficits in that location, right? What you're doing when you say that, when you're saying, when you do the desirable, what you're saying is.
We need to look at it, because it was a very compelling letter with diagrams, and you need
All
to
right.
address it.
I think, though, if we go through that letter.
By the way,
I think-
Mr. Hernandez, I want to appreciate all the work you put into this. It was very helpful.
Thank you.
So I think of the items that were outlined in that letter, I think we've addressed most of them, and I'd
I
be
want to
willing
be
to.
able to put it up on the board so we can all look at it, and he asked a very valid question, not feasible or not desired.
So
you need to
let's
look at those two.
stay on that a little bit, because I think.
No, I don't want to.
Okay.
I think we're beating this to death. We need to hear from,
Well, but Caesar, I do think that,
we can go over to the next meeting.
no, but it probably will, but I do think that John had addressed why option C is not really feasible. I mean, I understand what he's saying. It may not be, some others think it may be doable. Doable is different than feasible. And he's pointed out what the deficits are. So that doesn't mean that I don't think he ought to address the markup of Mr. Hernandez, but I also would like you to consider what Michael had suggested, maybe, and it might be that you'd come back and say, no, there's nothing that we can do because of the simply the two-story height.
Right.
Even if we had more coverage, there's nothing we could do that would really appreciably improve the visual. Because, I can look at what you've done, and I'm trying to judge what's really worth it here. It's not really appreciable. Yes, it changes somewhat, but overall, the code doesn't give me any idea of how I judge relative views of three affected property owners.
Right.
So,
If you put the second story issue to bed and say this is impossible, now you're only dealing with is there an option where there's a one-story component somewhere that is giving you the better view, and then we can discuss
I think
desirable versus.
I think it would really be
doable.
helpful. Let's just put a second story on I know what you wanted to do, but just put the second story on the existing ranch
Okay.
and show us what that looks like. Because otherwise, basically, you're saying you can't put a second story on the house unless you do what Mr. Hernandez, what I hear him saying is, no, you sort of have one story on one leg of the house, and you have two stories on another leg of the house.
Correct.
Right, I understand. I hear what you're saying. I don't know that that's feasible.
It becomes a new conversation that's much more focused on is it reasonable to ask them to do all of these things to the house and live up against the fence on the other property for the sake of the change of the saving the views for your homes, which I'm sure we're gonna have to have the conversation, but right now we're kind of juggling multiple things at once, which is this, can there be a second story, can there not, this design, and also, are there completely different designs that are possible?
I think the idea of single story, increasing, getting a variance for coverage to alleviate, to minimize obstruction might be an avenue.
Can I, just on that one quickly, because it would help with our analysis, we've been in front of this board a lot, and when we have conditions where coverage is over a certain amount, and this board is like, oh, that, we can't go over that number seems obscene, that seems too high. Is there a number, like, because we could analyze, 300% over allowable coverage, right? That is not what you're talking about. You're talking about if we had a 20% overage on coverage, what does that do to view impact, right? Right, you're not asking us to look for 100% over on coverage, and what does that do to view impact?
Well, 100% is not something that we ever approved in the past, at least not while I was sitting there.
Right, so a 20% coverage increase, has limits to it, right, in terms of how much volume could come off the top of the building, right? That if I take a 20% as the basis, 20% coverage allowance, and say, all right, say that the zoning board even allows that, if I take this off the top of the building, what kind of impact? And that's why I would ask.
If nothing happens, then it's not worth it.
Right.
But I think we have to explore those possibilities for the neighbors as well as this board.
And I think the neighborhood comps of coverage, having experience listening to this board, tend to be the guidelines, or at least the most compelling argument for the degree to which you can go over. So obviously, I think those are probably at your disposal to kind of.
Right, I think we have a neighbor, I don't know if we have a coverage analysis, but we have the neighbor.
Mr. Hernandez, are you,
Yeah.
Yeah, the only other piece is in the fundamental design of the home.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, the fundamental design of the home, and potentially employing more of a pitched roof aesthetic to take bulk off the corners of the structure.
The second story visual should remove the conflation of the roof as a variable. Right? Because you're saying, this is where the second story is going to be. You can then have a conversation of, is this roof appropriate? But at least we know where, are we talking about second story, or are we just talking about roof?
Well, what I'm getting at is if you orient the pitch of a roof linearly, right, the portion.
In other words, if the roof was perpendicular, if the pitch of the roof was perpendicular to the road.
Or if a portion was, right, that might alleviate some of the issue.
So just to be clear on that, just try to get stuff up, the living space associated with a second story has to do with the head height associated with the living space. The roof shape around that typically goes above that, and then the space in the sides, like if you did an A-frame condition where you took more space off the roof, you would have potentially have more volume overall, and you might open up views in this area here, but you can't think that that's the same as having, upstairs that's this big. What ends up happening when a second floor is underneath a roof, the occupiable space underneath the roof is very much smaller than what it would be from the footprint of that roof, if that makes sense. If you've ever occupied an attic, right, it's much smaller.
We might, potentially, George, in the last meeting, mentioned the option for, can be, I'm sure for you, not an exciting suggestion, but the flat roof design that isn't uncommon for a Georgian colonial. Like, my house is a Georgian colonial, and it does have a sloped roof that goes into a flat top, so it does not come to a point.
That's where we are right now. So right now, the design of the house has similar to Madam C.J. Walker's house, right? It's a classical house. It has a roof that comes up, and then there's a flat portion of the house. If we had continued the gable up, we'd be up another.
So it isn't going to.
Yeah, we've already reduced the height by going to a flat roof condition now.
Okay, Mr. Hernandez, you wrapped up?
Yep.
Okay. Do we have another? Thank you. Thank you very much, by the way. Second time, I'll say your letter was very informative. Anybody else? There were two other letters, Mr. Crump. Is it Crump or Krupp? Krupp, sir.
I have my letter. I don't know if you want me to read it, or have you all read it?
Well, if you paraphrase, we could save some time.
Okay, yeah, well, I think whoever said you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole was kind of on target. I really think, you know, Mr. Malone's talking about all the pressures that affect each of these different plans. You know, this doesn't work because it puts too much pressure on the north property and et cetera. You know, I really think simply that it's the scale of this house that's putting pressure on everything.
Mr. Crook, you don't have to talk that close.
It's the scale and the size of this house that's not appropriate, and is what's putting pressures on everything and limiting the way it can be redesigned, in my view. Yeah, it's a nice lot, it's a big lot, it's a beautiful neighborhood, but this house takes up, it's a narrow lot, and this house, and in a sense you might have to visit to really appreciate it. This house takes up a broad side, it may fit the coverage codes, etc., but it takes up the whole width, basically, of the lot, and by adding the second story to the whole width of the lot, effectively obstructs everyone's views. We are not trying to gain views, those of us on Meadowbrook Road. We're trying to preserve views. And that, again, is, I think, part of what you're charged with, is trying to preserve our views. We're not trying to gain views. People are talking about us trying to gain views by using this particular option versus another option. These options are all taking away our views. If you're trying to balance who has a right to preserve their view and who has a right to take away their view, I think you have to keep that in mind. We're not trying to gain views, we're trying to preserve our views. I kind of object to Mr. Malone's characterization of these views as partial winter views. They're actually beautiful, almost three-season views that extend from late fall to spring. They're not partial. I mean, you've seen some of the pictures. They're quite expansive views of the river over the existing house. And it's not just an eyesight view of the existing house that's relevant. I read the code about view preservation, and I read the code about what the planning board is supposed to be considering in trying to weigh and balance what, you know, should or shouldn't be done. And there repeatedly are words like harmony, aesthetics, in addition to view preservation. And I would suggest that a house of this scale and bulk and design is absolutely not in harmony with the neighborhood. Even though it's a nice neighborhood, and yes, there are some grand houses in the neighborhood. There are lots of modest houses in the neighborhood. Ours on Meadowbrook Road are relatively modest homes. This house really doesn't belong in this lot. And I think people are ignoring that. But not that they're ignoring that. I don't think they can appreciate it if you're not really there and see the setting. And again, I'm just trying to suggest to you that part of what should be considered, and it hasn't gotten any consideration in the discussion of the drawings, the designs, etc., is the aesthetics of the setting, and what this house will irreversibly do with the aesthetics of the setting to all of us who live there. I also remember a couple of us asking at the last meeting for the views, these line drawings, to be presented as blocked out views, because I truly feel that any mind's perception of what's being taken away or what's still there is very different when you can see what exists underneath the line, as opposed to seeing a blackout of what the bulk and scale of this building has an impact on what you're seeing. Without physically visiting the property, it's the best way for you to appreciate what's being taken away by this house. I completely agree with the idea of redesigning the house in some way. I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer. Sitting outside thinking to myself, yes, it's a one-story house, and there's a pool immediately behind the house. In fact, no one has addressed the fact that part of the proposed plan is to move that pool up the hill to the back property line, which, in view of the previous discussion about the property in the Broadway buffer zone and the noise and the machinery and the equipment that go along with the pool, I mean, part of this proposal is to have a pool that's backed up immediately to the back property line fence. I strongly object to that. No one has addressed the issue of privacy, and again, these are somewhat intangible things, so they're hard to address. But I strongly object to any moving of the house back up the hill. Even this, blue line design that supposedly shows a minimal loss to the front of the house in terms of, minimal backing up from Fargo Lane to the front of the house. I mean, the back of the house is way further back up than the existing structure. And that significantly impacts the view and the privacy of the people who live behind the property. So I just, again, I think these are things that, need to be considered in addition to what's been discussed. I don't know how to, guide you. Obviously, I think it's a very difficult situation, but I think you guys have to balance our I don't think this should be seen all in the context of the 39 Fargo property owner being able to build more or less what he wants. I mean, I don't think that should be accepted as a given. I think that should be balanced against the rights of all of us who live there now.
Okay, thank you very much. In terms of the board saying giving what he wants, I think the fact that this is into the fourth or fifth meeting, which is rare for this board, is he's not getting a rubber stamp. Your issue about bulk, there is a code that's called FAR. It's the floor area ratio. It's the McMansion code to prevent bulk, and they meet that code, so there's no discussion there because they meet that code. Mr. Hernandez...
Well, forgive me, can I interrupt?
No, you can't.
Okay, sorry.
Mr. Hernandez did what you... Mr. Malone to take it into consideration. He did do the blackout. I don't know if you saw his letter, but it's an interesting letter. In terms of the pool infringing on the backyard, there are setback rules, which I believe we haven't gotten to it, but I'm sure the pool is not going to require a variance for a setback, and he's saying, John is confirming that. In terms of privacy, we haven't gotten to that, but we briefly discussed that earlier. We're not going to get into the privacy because we haven't decided where the house is going to be. One of the issues of privacy is if you put too much foliage in for privacy, you wind up blocking views. So that's a conundrum that we'll deal with later once we know where the house is going to be. So with that said, we're going to move on. Is there any other public?
David, you want to go? Sure.
So, John, I'd like to commend you for... My name for the record is David Phillips. I'm the owner of 33 Fargo Lane. I appreciate the opportunity to share my concerns with you tonight. John, you've done an amazing job coming up with options. The fact of the matter is that none of those options work because the design of the house is wrong. It's too big, the scope is too large. None of that it will fundamentally change the character of the neighborhood. And as the immediately adjoining property, it will have a big impact on the quality of my family's life on Fargo Lane. So I think we just have to recognize that a two-story house on this site is not viable.
Wait, Mr. Phillips, can I just ask you, are you on the corner?
I am at the corner of Fargo and Meadowbrook.
You have the Colonial?
Yes, no, it's not a colonial. It's a brick house.
It's a brick house, it's a Georgian, and it's 2 stories?
The 2 stories, yeah.
Same way, just same way as 39?
So whether my house is 2 stories or not isn't really relevant to this discussion.
You just said that a 2-story house would change the character of the neighborhood, and all I'm pointing out is you live in a 2-story house.
A 2-story house on that location will fundamentally change the neighborhood. And you know that.
But why
I think the homeowner knows that too.
Why would it fundamentally change the neighborhood if you live in the two-story house next door?
So the design of my house, which John ably presented to you, is not relevant to the design of the proposed
You
property.
just made it relevant.
So I'm making it relevant by saying that where that two-story house is proposed just isn't viable.
When it's proposed, not the fact of a two-story house.
There is no option for a two-story house on any of the 5 sites that John has proposed. It's just not going to happen. And if you want to change the quality of life, go ahead and approve this project. It doesn't really matter where you put it. It's a bad siting, it's a bad design. It should be a one-story home.
How does that siding affect your house?
It affects it with privacy, but since we haven't decided a location,
Other
you've
than
made it
privacy.
clear that we're not talking about privacy.
Other than privacy, it doesn't affect your views?
No, I'm not talking about my views.
No, but so I'm just trying to
I'm
understand.
talking about neighborhood.
I saw your letter.
I'm talking about community and neighborhood, and I have a right to express my concerns about that. So if you want to approve a two-story project, put it anywhere. It doesn't really matter. Any of those 5 options will diminish the quality of life in our community. So you can decide what you want.
Would you propose an addition to a second-story addition to the ranch that's there now?
Yes, I would, no matter where it is.
No matter where it is. So you would just oppose anything other than other than the ranch?
Please
Correct.
utilize your mask, please.
Sure.
Okay.
So that's correct. A two-story house in any location is going to change the neighborhood. And one of the things that we like about Irvington is the feeling of neighborhood, of community. I don't think I've ever seen such consensus or objecting to a project. And everybody who has and is any way contiguous to this site has raised concerns. So now what I would do is just recommend to the homeowner that they think about whether or not it's possible to have a one-story home.
Is 41 Fargo a two-story house?
I don't know.
It is. Yes, it is.
So we're not
But
talking
the
about
two-story
41
houses
Fargo, we're
along
not talking
Fargo?
about 33 Fargo, we're talking about 39
No,
Fargo.
but you talk about somehow a two-story house on Fargo Lane.
No, a two-story house at 39 Fargo Lane isn't viable.
I think what we're trying to understand is,
Understood.
I'm trying to find.
Hold on a second, let me explain this. You're talking about 2 stories as a bulk issue. As I explained to the previous speaker, this board is not entitled to make up new codes to satisfy what one perceives as bulk or mass. There is an existing code, floor area ratio, and they meet that. So if they meet the code, which addresses mass and bulk, we cannot invent new code, and the trustees have to do that. And so that argument of mass and bulk is not, it meets that code which addresses mass and bulk. We can't invent new code.
So, Mr. Manfredi, I don't think that anybody here thinks a two-story house at 39 Fargo Lane, no matter where you put it, is going to be viable.
Correct.
Wait,
Well, maybe the homeowner feels it's viable.
Well, we don't have to arbitrarily say you can't do this. If we had the code that said you can't do that, then we could say, well, the code says you can't do that. But the make-up code, suddenly we don't like two-story houses, is not something we're entitled to do.
So,
And you may not agree with that, but that's the story. If you're going to continue the discussion that I have to change my mind or make up a code, then we're going nowhere, and it's 10 o'clock. And if you have something pertinent to say that's other than bulk and mass, we'd be happy to listen.
I wonder if anybody in this room thinks that a two-story home at 39 Fargo Lane, anywhere on the property, won't affect the sense of community and neighborhood.
Honestly, I'll tell you that the current ranch house is an eyesore, and I'm shocked that it's been there as long as it has been. So I totally disagree with you, and I think a two-story home is completely appropriate for that lot and that street.
Well, I totally agree with you on the ranch that's there.
Somehow, listening to your interventions, thought that there was concern about the scope of the project. So then I can only speak for myself. I have a concern about the scope of the project and its impact on
You
our
gotta put
sites.
your mask on.
It's on, Mr. Manfredi.
All right, you're taking it off one more time.
Please sit down if you're not gonna wear your mask. Please sit down, thank you.
I'm not gonna sit down, I'm just gonna depart.
Oh, that's even better.
Even better, you said?
That's right.
Isn't that overstepping your bounds, sir?
Excuse me,
You may
let's just
think so.
leave, please.
You may think so, but I don't, and I'm not apologizing.
Please step outside, please.
Excuse me.
Can you please step outside for short discussion?
Is there any other member of the public? You have already spoken. Is there anybody that has not spoken? You haven't spoken. Yes. There's a guy in the back raising.
I don't know if he wants to or not.
Guys, I'm gonna keep it quick.
17 Meadowbrook. I think Alex has some good ideas. I'm not going to talk about scope, although I do think it's too big, but I think you got to balance that with the words that, and what we've been all focused on is the planning board has the responsibility of causing the least possible obstruction to the view of the Hudson River. And we talked about the wall, but the wall, the block, I'm in the middle property, my view's gone. So I know you have to balance that out, but I lose the view totally, okay? Steve spoke at all the other issues, I don't want to rehash them. I'm not going to waste your time. I think we appreciate your time tonight. Sorry what happened tonight, and we hope you make the best view for it.
If you want to speak?
May I speak?
Yes, you may.
Thank you very much. I'm Robert Leonard. I'm the homeowner of 39 Fargo, and I'm hoping that I can bring us back to reality and out of the theoretical. I'm a homeowner. I pay taxes in Irvington. I have rights the way my neighbors do. Thank you for pointing out the pool. The pool's nowhere near the property line. It's way far back from it, just another misstatement of fact. I think what John was showing with the visuals was that there's this area just over the roof line of the existing house. No matter what we do, unless we build a house that has a hole in it to look through, we're not going to be able to preserve that piece of view, no matter where we put the house. And that's the point. And we can stay in the theoretical, as John was talking, but ultimately we're going to have to put pen to paper. We're going to have to expend some money and go to the next stage and ultimately have a thumbs up, a thumbs down from the board. And I'm hoping that we've given enough and we'll give some more. I very much appreciate, again, the matters raised by the neighbors. We spent months before we gave our initial submission with John beating us down on what we wanted to do, having the house further up, having a higher roof, having a real attic, a number of other things that we wanted. That I wanted to put a tree house in. I have, again, 2 little kids. Love to have a tree house, beautiful trees to do that. Blocking the view, coverage ratio, we're not doing it. The patio we have is tiny there because we don't want to have, to go for a variance because we're, again, we're limited in what we can do. With all of this, I don't know, maybe we'll ask for a larger patio. So I hear, nobody wants to have their views diminished. Again, they have, I'll say it's partial winter views. It's through the trees on our property that they have views of the water. They're nice views, some of them. I can't do anything about it. Again, we read the view preservation rule. Before we bought the house, we read it before we bought the house, the purpose of the view preservation rule. And again, there's no legislative history to it that I could find. And it seems to me that, we're building a house on the lowest part of the property, 7 feet or more below what's allowed to be built. We're building it without asking for any variance of any kind as of right, and I think we should be able to do that. The eyesore that's there now needs to go. We'd love to knock it down today, except we use it because we use the pool. But I think removing that and to build the house that we're looking to build which again meets all of the requirements of the code, is going to increase property values, and that's the principal purpose of the View Preservation District. And, you know, comparables in the area are what do it. To answer some of the other things, every single house on Meadowbrook and every single house on Fargo is a two-story house. Privacy, I know we're not addressing it, but at the...
We will at some point, but not...
No, I understand that, but we, I know that John had talked to our gentleman, our neighbor, who left quickly, a few weeks ago, about the fact that we wanted badly too, and we're totally willing to work with him on making sure that his privacy is preserved. Notwithstanding the fact, believe it or not, that, you know, my wife saw him a week ago in his boxers walking out to get his newspaper. That's a man concerned with privacy. To say more. A lot of what the neighbors have said seems to me to come from fear. Fear of change, fear of loss of their park that they have in front of them. And fear is manifested in a lot of the words they use. So I wrote down a bunch of the words, which is, and I think you addressed it, so maybe I'll just use a couple of them, but it all related to the large and excessive height remains out of character, large, high structure, massive. We can build a two-story house as of right. It's a 5,300 square foot house. By the way, 33 is almost a 5,000 square foot house and a 6,000 FAR. So I'm not, again, sure what he was complaining about. I'm not sure there's a house that's of the size of ours on Meadowbrook, because it's zoned differently, although there was that new house that was put up a year or two ago that looks like it's probably about 6,000 square feet. That's by the... It's fearing to me and to my wife are the neighbors ganging up on us. I mean, again, we have two young kids looking to move into Irvington to bring them up and have them go into the Irvington schools. I offered at the last meeting, you know, to meet with any of the neighbors who wanted to discuss kind of the trees that we're removing and possible trees we could talk about with the tree folks in town that would assist in their winter views. And I think, and John didn't talk about it, but I think the trees we're removing that are on the thing are going to open up their winter views. And then there's also the possibility of additional ones where we can then find the other places to put new trees in. But, you know, the fear we have is just being ganged up on, and we're not trying to take someone's views, and several of the letters said that we're trying to take their views for our views. That's not the purpose of the house. We're looking to build a two-story house that we can live in with our family, and as John said, the orientation of the house is the backyard. We're not orienting the house to the front. We want it to look not like a Frankenstein house. We want it to be commensurate with the rest of the neighborhood, perpendicular to the road, and looking stately. But, I mean, we have designs for, you know, the back, you know, family room for the floor-to-ceiling doors that slide, not the sliding doors from the 1960s, but the doors that you see on those California houses, where you can, you know, you become an inside-out. That's what we're looking.
Mr. Meyer, I don't mean to cut you off, but we have another application to do.
I understand.
I think we have your point.
Okay, let me just say a few more things. I hear you. It troubles me that my neighbors want to design the house that my wife and I want to live in.
By the way, I don't think they're ganging up on you. I think they're trying to preserve what they have.
I understand,
I didn't get the impression they were ganging up on you, but go ahead. Try to wrap it up, please. It's 10 o'clock.
I'm trying, sir. This is very meaningful to us. We've been here several times, and what we really want to do is to get to the end. So I'll go to the end. I don't think anyone on the board or in the community or in this room, if it was their property, would build a house sideways, push it up like a broom against the fence, period. Like, I don't know that we need to continue to discuss that. We're not going to build that house. And so if that's the house that ultimately you guys tell us that's the only one that you'll approve, we'll have to figure out what else to do, because that's just not a viable option. It's for all the reasons John said. We did look at building a modern house in the middle or on the side, and I know you didn't mention it, I was hoping you would, it doesn't work. It's the same thing, it's that area above the ridge line. So we think we actually have, presented the board with a number of other different options that, for various reasons, don't work. And we think that the value that we're bringing to the neighborhood by putting in what we're going to put in there that meets all of the criteria for, the building code far outweighs, other options. So what we actually intend to do and would like to do is we'd like to submit for next month, we'd like to submit our option 2, and we'd like to have with that addressing the engineer's concerns on drainage, on privacy, and the other things that they've raised in their letter. Because otherwise, we're just going to keep going at this month in and month out. And it's costing a tremendous amount of money. John may be in here in a couple months to put an extension on his house. But
I think you overestimate, you overestimate my margins.
But there's only so much we can do, and I think we've given the board sufficient optionality to show, to show that we can stay here for month after month. Can you do this? Can you do that? It doesn't, the diagrams show it. You can't get.
Diagrams are very helpful. We just want to incorporate what Mr. Fernandez brought forward into the presentation, and we'll take a look at it.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be happy to, I apologize, we'd be happy to submit a written response to that next month as part of our delivery of option 2, if that would be helpful.
That would be very helpful.
Okay, thank you very much, appreciate the time.
And why, and elaborate on what, just not feasible as opposed to undesirable. I think that was the critical point, it's not feasible. Okay. (2021-20), 50 Half Moon Lane.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is William Null. I'm a member of the firm of Petty and Fader, and we're here on behalf of the owners of 50 Half Moon Lane, the size. With me tonight is Tezos Kokoris, architect, and Adam Thyberg with Insight Engineer. We've taken the time to go back and evaluate a number of the issues, but what we focused on primarily is the significant issue that you've been wrestling with in the last application, which is, as you know, the view overlay district. And in that connection, we also substantially reduced the size of the building. We reduced the building coverage from its existing 6,600 plus square feet to the proposed 4,600 square feet. We modified the building by dropping its height and otherwise so that it's conforming.
What did that, you reduced the square footage, what did that do for coverage?
We reduced coverage from 6,600, 32.
No, what did it do for percent over? Does it meet the code?
It now meets the code.
That's what the point
Yeah,
is.
I'm sorry, yes, it now meets the code, but it's a reduction of about 30%. And obviously, that we're removing the existing house under the proposed design plan, and we're moving it forward and everything else, but we're also sinking it on the site. We're lowering it as far as it goes, but we've got the same issue, a similar issue as was discussed, and that is by adding a second story, we affect views from the adjacent homes. I sent a letter dated July 20th that quoted from the Visual Overlay District. You seem quite familiar with it. You recited to it just moments ago. But it's important, I think.
Carry it with me.
Yeah, it's important, and you identified it in what you were saying. But at 224-150, it notes that subject to the provisions of 224-151, the permitted principal and accessory uses for any lot or parcel in a VP district shall be the same as otherwise permitted in the district in which the lot or parcel is located. Now, that deals with uses, but you also confirmed that the scale, masses, and everything else are part of what each of the lots has. And the challenge with this site is, if we add a second story, we're going to block some views. Now, the views that were shown in some of the letters, and we'll go through a formal response to the letters in the next month, but some of the views provided in the letters were to the south of the site over an adjacent driveway. Actually, the linden, the American base tree that was referenced in the landscape architect's comments, is at the southeast corner of the site. And you can see that in the photograph to the right of that photograph. So the view that was shown is a view of the river over the adjacent property, which happens to also be a one-story building, but down a driveway and through that way. So there are some view corridors there. One of the key things that we propose as an alternative to consider is elimination of a lot of the trees, the taller trees along the street line, in an effort to try and open up the overall viewscape over the property itself. Views of the sunset, views of the Palisades, views of the river. And the trees that were proposed to be replaced are columnar Norway spruce. It will not get higher than 25 feet or so. And we can provide you with that data to confirm it. So the idea was that when we put in screening, we're looking to preserve privacy of views into the house rather than views that would be affected over the house. Right now, there really are no views from the street itself, from the right-of-way, because of a 7-foot fence. I think you probably have been to the site or are familiar with the site. So what we're looking to do is to walk you through. You can see in the shaded area above on this inside drawing, that's the existing house. And you can see just by comparison, eyeball comparison, the mass of the proposed house is smaller, although the height is taller. And what we're trying to do is to enjoy the views of the Hudson out the back of the house, and to provide a backyard where the kids can play, where right now it's relatively small and sloped and more difficult. It's around the pool without any protection, particularly for the kids. So I'm going to let Adam otherwise speak to our Kozas. Kozas, why don't you speak to what was done in more detail?
My name is Tasos Kokoris, architect, in addition to what Mr. Knoll said, it's also important to point out that the current backyard is very close to the train tracks. So when those trains run by, it's very disruptive. That was part of the reason.
Get used to it, I live near. Well, they told me once, what's that noise? I said, what noise? It sounds like a train. He says, it is a train.
Yes. Yes, so, we can't, obviously we can't avoid that completely, but we can make it a little bit better by relocating the house. As far as the views are concerned, I went out there and we submitted a set of drawings that have some geometric information sections and also photographs. Can you move to that, please? Yeah. I'll speak loudly. May I go over there and point?
That comes over.
Wow.
I checked around.
Okay, good.
You passed the altitude test, you got it off.
Thank you. So this is a section through the site. This is the proposed building. And you can see here that the proposed floor is lower than, this is a section of the existing house, this is a section of the proposed house. Both the first floor and the basement are lower than the existing in order to minimize the height involved. We meet the zoning criteria for maximum height here. Because of the slope, the apparent height of the house from the street is closer to about 28 feet. the current height, side of the height of the house is, the new height's going to be about 8 feet higher, which represents the second story, basically. If you can flip to the next one. This set of pictures, I used a 50 millimeter lens to take all these photographs so that they're not too wide angle or too focused on a specific spot. All of these photographs are taken from the street. The next set of photographs are taken from property owners across the street. Properties across the street. So you can see here, I don't know if you can see from where you are, but I took photographs from 3 points here, 3 points there, and one across the street. And this is the fence that we're talking about, 7-foot high fence. Can you flip to the next one? Thank you. These photographs are taken from the properties across the street. And you can see can you focus on this one?
Is there 45 Half Moon?
One is, go to the index. One is from 45 to the right. Now, I went to the house at 45, and there was a sticky note saying not to ring the bell, so I couldn't ring the bell. But I took a photograph from the north corner and the south corner, photographs 1 and 2, and then this house, which is directly across, number 55, I was able to get into the house and take photographs from the second floor, from 2 windows on the second floor.
With permission, he got into the house.
Yes, yes. I knocked on the door. That was very nice.
The child saw my thumb.
You like that?
I like it.
She wanted to be in the picture.
She won my heart.
She wanted to be in the picture. So let's go to that one.
Yeah, let's go.
There he is. Very nice kid. And you can see here the impact of their view from this window. Now, I don't want to, they love their standing there and looking at the river. This is the current roof ridge here, and the proposed would be up here.
Is that
The one to the right?
Yes.
The image to the right?
Yes.
Also shows?
Yes, it does. Right. That's the guest room window in the guest bedroom. This is the roof ridge, current roof ridge, and this would be the proposed roof ridge.
No, that's proposed now.
This is the existing?
No, the line you're drawing, that's what you're currently proposing.
That's correct.
It's not what it was initially.
No. Initially, it was, I think it was about 3 feet higher than that.
Okay. For the next rendering, it would be nice to know what the initial, put a line for the initial submittal.
Okay.
So that we in the board here can
Sure.
digest the fact that you made improvements and it is less objectionable. Your third submittal is less obstructive because you did whatever you did.
I appreciate
It's nice
that.
to know where the initial,
The original and the current,
well, I think there was a second submittal, so maybe all 2 lines.
right. I will draw all of those. As a matter of fact, in retrospect, what I'll probably do is issue all of these separately, all these photographs separately. It'll be quite a long deck, but then, size-wise, you'll be able to see exactly what the effects are. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. I don't want to keep talking here, so.
So if you could do that, I know that there were the additional photos that were submitted.
45 Half.
Yes.
Yes, it'll be
By them, so if you did that to their photos as well, that would be great.
Sure.
You got those?
Yes, we did.
Yes, we have those.
Yeah, we had.
Just for the record, that's a letter from, I need my glasses, Mr. Gober, at 45 Half Moon Lane. And they were a series of photographs, and what we're asking for is, on those photographs, to pencil in the first proposal, the second proposal, and the current proposal, so that it's obvious what was and what is.
I understand. And the one thing that I will point out in the next presentation is that I will draw those lines, as you say, on the photographs, but when you when you zoom into a specific spot, I think it makes the effect seem larger than it is when you take into account the entire, viewpoint.
I think the photographs you presented
Yes.
are fair and balanced in what they're looking for.
Thank you.
Just do the same thing for.
You can take the same
45.
photograph.
Yeah.
Add the line, if you could pencil line in for the width, that'd be actually
Sure.
over the top.
We can do that.
And we certainly
I'll do
appreciate
that.
the effort of lowering the house and changing.
Thank you.
got it. Just want to be able to see it, of what it was and what it is.
And we do think that,
Microphone.
we do think that the,
It's for the transcripts, I'm sorry.
we do think that the removal of the trees also enhances the view, because many of them are evergreens that make it so that the views that are seen from these adjacent homes are through kind of vertical slots
Yeah.
that are year-round, actually. So,
Yeah. Concerning the trees, our architect, landscape architect, agrees with the way you're handling the north
Right.
property, taking it out and putting in, but the front of the property, you're replacing the wooden wall with a foliage wall, and it might be more palatable if there was a variety of species and sort of staggered, so that you get, what was the word, punctuated view.
Realistic.
yeah, so we have,
More realistic, as opposed to aspect ratio.
yeah.
You can work it out with our landscape architect.
Sure. The one thing I wanted to say is, one of the advantages of maximizing the backyard and decreasing the front yard is that we're not necessarily looking for screening for the house from the street.
I know, we just want to make sure it doesn't look like a green wall as
Of
opposed
course.
to a wooden wall.
Of course, and I totally agree with staggering plants and interchanging deciduous with evergreen, but we can make that screen as light and transparent as possible, because we're not concerned about the screening the house, was all I'm trying to say.
Okay,
Right, so we can look to modify that.
The microphone, please, I'm sorry.
Work with,
We can look to modify that.
Susan Nolan and.
Yeah, we can have that done with our landscape architect, that's fine.
Oh, I meant to ask you, the latest site plan doesn't have a patio for the pool. The initial didn't have one, the second one had it.
We went back and forth, we ran into trouble with coverage, obviously, and their existing pool is just a pool, grass all around.
Okay.
And they're used to that, so I said to them, can you do that again? They said, sure. And by the way,
And by the way, I see my note here, whatever you do with trees, you have to save the 40-inch American basswood.
Understood.
We can do that.
Understood. And the one more note is that the pool equipment will be in the mechanical room in the house.
That would be so,
Yeah.
we've got the coverage they work out.
Yeah.
And to ask Laurie's question, where's the pool equipment? I hope you don't need a variance for it.
No, it's going to be inside.
Inside.
Okay. All right, now I'll ask, any comment on the board, Laurie?
No.
Dan?
I just think we mentioned 45, we need the pictures and the scale, 3 different versions, in addition to 50.
Mike Smith?
No, I appreciate what you did. This is the easier of the two view preservation ones, especially with, you had a little bit more to work with. But certainly, by coming in within code, now we don't have that coverage issue, which is important. But I have nothing else.
No comment. Michael? No comment? I think we're done unless you have
Okay,
something else.
so we will come
I don't
back.
have to ask any members of the public, because there aren't any. But I will anyway, there are no members of the public.
So we will come back to you with those responses, and thank you very much for your time and consideration tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. By the way, thank you for sticking it out, it's almost 10:30. I'm sure you were biting your nails during the last meeting.
Well, except we're probably getting paid.
We're not. I know. Good night.
Good night.